Chapter 1346. Suhana's disciple had the strength of the true fire spiritual refinement state, so the Kunlun devil cult was also going to send a true fire spiritual refinement state warrior. Tanya chuckled and said, "Everyone, it's my blood-tooth Hall's turn to be in the limelight today. Leave it to me." The others shrugged their shoulders and did not say anything. Tanya and Yen Bugue's strength was already infinitely close to the heaven and earth mysterious opening realm, so it was safest for the two of them to go. Now that Tanya had spoken, Yen Bugue would definitely not fight with him. With the previous example, Li Ziqi was much more cautious this time. Without much nonsense, his body shone with the five-colored divine light, looking extremely dazzling in an instant. Tanya sneered and said, "It's so gorgeous, like a peacock spreading its tail. Are you asking for a puppet?" Li Ziqi said angrily, "Cut the crap." As soon as he said that, the five-colored divine light attacked Tanya. Within the five-colored divine light, there were 5 different attributes of Gang Qi intertwining. Each of them reinforced and restrained each other, evolving into more changes in power. It was extremely strange. But at this moment, Tanya sneered and began to circle around him. In an instant, countless hidden weapons shot out from his side. Bone-piercing nails, heart-piercing arrows, dragon-tailed darts, plum needles, bone crusher. There were countless hidden weapons densely packed together, like a dark cloud covering the sky. Concealed weapons were something that only low-level martial artists would use. Even some low-level martial artists from large sects wouldn't use them because it was too degrading. This disciple of the Kunlun devil cult had already reached the true fire spiritual refinement state, yet he was still using hidden weapons as his main attack method. How lacking was his cultivation technique? However, some of the strong warriors present raised their eyebrows as if they had seen something. The hidden weapons that Tanya had shot out were not as simple as stellar energy attached to the hidden weapons. Each hidden weapon seemed to be connected to Tanya by a thread. These hidden weapons were not individual, but a whole. Thinking of this, the expressions of the people present had already changed. How many hidden weapons were there? There were tens of thousands of them. It was almost impossible to count. However, Tanya was able to control all of them. Just how strong was his control over his power qi? Li Ziqi did not notice this. The five-colored divine light in his hand swept out. Immediately, a large pile of hidden weapons fell to the ground. Insignificant tricks, what a joke. Just as Li Ziqi sneered, he heard Suana shout, "Be careful." Li Ziqi was stunned, but it was already too late. Countless hidden weapons filled the air, completely enveloping Li Ziqi. At the same time, the threads of stellar energy on the hidden weapons grew thicker and thicker, becoming visible to everyone. Countless threads connected to Tanya's hands. As Tanya's hands formed a seal, he lightly spat out a word, "Break." In the blink of an eye, the countless threads tightened, and an incomparably violent explosion of earth qi and the sound of flesh being torn apart came from the entire field. In the next moment, a large amount of blood flowed out from the ground. Tanya waved his hand, and all the hidden weapons returned to his hand. "It's shameful to waste it. These hidden weapons of mine are not disposable." When Tanya retracted the hidden weapons in his hand, everyone then saw the situation in the field. It should be said that there was nothing wrong. Li Ziqi's entire body had been completely torn into a pile of minced meat. He could not even put his body back together. The expression on Suhana's face was already extremely furious, but he was holding back and did not explode. Actually, Suana was in a difficult position now. The Sanskrit's original intention was to use the Daoist rules to embarrass Chu Xiu. At the very least, they could not allow Chu Xiu to establish a sect and live so freely. In the end, 2 people on their side had died consecutively. Both of them were outstanding disciples of the younger generation. Now, it was the Sanskrit's turn to feel uncomfortable. Therefore, the other disciples were also staring at Suana. Should they still make a move? Suana clenched his teeth fiercely. "Man 2, you do it this time." Man 2 was a burly man with a bare upper body and countless runes carved on it. He had the cultivation of the heaven and earth mystic realm. He was not someone from the Brahma temple. Instead, he was the palace master of Shiva Temple's Beast Lord Divine Palace. The battle prowess of a cultivator from Shiva Temple was extremely shocking. At the very least, there were not many cultivators from the Brahma Temple who could defeat him. However, when they saw this scene, the people on Chu Xiu's side all revealed puzzled smiles. In terms of the heaven and earth mystic realm, the people on Chu Xiu's side were the strongest. Shang Tianliang had not become a martial immortal, but he was still at the heaven and earth mystic realm. As for the remaining people, Lu Jianghe, Mei Qinglian, Chu Wuji, Lu Fengxian and the others, they were also at the heaven and earth mystic realm. None of them were to be trifled with. It could be said that any one of them would be enough to deal with the other party. Therefore, the few of them actually started modestly giving way to each other. Shang Tianliang curled his lips and said, "He's not even a half-step martial immortal. How boring. You youngsters, go ahead." Mei Qinglian had a look of disdain and said, "He's too ugly. It'll affect my mood. I'm not going." Lu Jianghe took a few glances at him and shook his head. He said, "He looks quite strong. However, he's a bit fat. He doesn't have enough blood energy." Chu Wuji sighed and said, "I've been busy helping Old Wei. I'm exhausted. I'll leave the fighting to you all." Seeing that no one wanted to fight, Lu Fengxian revealed a gentle smile and said, "Very well, leave it to me." After saying that, Lu Fengxian dragged Halberd, who was in his hand, to the center of the stage. The Beast Lord Divine Palace's palace master, Man Tu, was already infuriated by his opponent's words. His opponent's tone was as if he was trash and they couldn't be bothered to fight. When he saw the handsome LV Fengxian, who wasn't too tall or big, step forward, he immediately roared, "Pretty boy, die." As the sound of his voice faded, the illusory figures behind him merged into his body. There were dragons, war elephants, lions, and so on. The roars of beasts shook the heavens. Every step they took seemed to cause the entire earth to rumble. Lu Fengxian shook his head lightly. In the next moment, demonic flames soared into the sky and powerful demonic aura encircled his body. It was as if he was wearing a battle armor made entirely of demonic aura. 9 Heaven's demonic golden body. Wielding the ancient halberd in his hand, a gigantic demonic silhouette appeared behind LV Fengxian. As his halberd slashed down, the powerful force was enough to shatter mountains and shatter rocks, causing an ear-piercing explosion to ring out in the air. Boom! With a loud boom, Man Tu was directly smashed to the ground by the halberd. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood and looked at Lu Fengxian in disbelief. How could this skinny pretty boy be able to explode with such great power? He roared angrily and the countless images of wild beasts around him surged towards Lu Fengxian. However, Lu Fengxian still slashed down with his halberd. Everything was crushed in the face of absolute power. When Lu Fengxian's third halberd fell, Man Tu could no longer withstand it. Both his arms were shattered. His physical body was strong, but Lu Fengxian's power was even stronger. Seeing that Lu Fengxian's fourth halberd was about to fall, Suhana's expression changed and he hurriedly tried to stop it. The first 2 people who attacked were from the Brahma temple. Even if they died, he believed that Lord Renaga would understand. However, Man Tu was from the Shiva temple. If that lunatic Yanma knew that he had killed the palace master under him, this matter wouldn't be settled so easily. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu's right hand moved. The 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet let out a shrill sound of the primordial spirit trembling. Suhana's primordial spirit was immediately impacted and his body stopped. It was during this pause that Lu Fengxian's fourth halberd fell. Her power and aura erupted to the peak. The unparalleled halberd directly split Man Tu into 2, and the square was instantly filled with blood. Chu Xiu! Suana roared. The anger and killing intent in his eyes could no longer be concealed. At this moment, he couldn't wait to fight with Chu Xiu. However, he also knew that this was the Kunlun Devil cult, Chu Xiu's headquarters. If he fought here, he had almost no chance of winning. After a while, Suanna said coldly. Good, good, good. Chu Xiu, you're very good. I'll give you the soul retrieval bell. Take good care of it. Sooner or later, the Brahmin church will personally take it back. After saying that, Suanna was about to leave. However, Chu Xiu said coldly, do you think the Kunlun devil cult is a place where you can come and go as you please? I'm not interested in this soul retrieval bell. It's better to give it back to the Brahmin church. It doesn't matter if you give it back sooner or later. Why don't I send you off now? As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, he actually used the law embodiment of heaven and earth, grabbed the soul retrieval bell, and threw it at Suanna. No one expected that Chu Xiu would actually make a move and use his mystique. Suanna didn't expect it either. 5-colored divine radiance shone behind him. The power of the 5 elements combined and disintegrated any power in heaven and earth. The soul retrieval bell exploded amidst the clash between Suanna and Chu Xiu's power. However, Suanna was also sent flying. When Suhana's 5-color divine radiance was cultivated to its peak, it was indeed capable of disintegrating any power. After all, no power in heaven and earth could escape the range of the power of the 5 elements. However, his 5-colored divine radiance was unable to disintegrate the purest power of the law embodiment of heaven and earth. The 3 punches landed and the entire ground trembled. Suanna was in an extremely sorry state. Seeing that Chinqing Di and Wei Shiya were about to make a move, Suhana's body immediately erupted with several rays of light that soared into the sky. The 5-colored light fused into one and, like a rainbow bridge, swept up the other disciples of the Brahmin church and rapidly left. Suanna was, after all, a 6th-level martial immortal. Putting aside his battle prowess, at the very least, his foundation of power was stronger than Chu Xiu's. Chu Xiu had the confidence to fight against Suanna. However, if Suanna was bent on escaping, there was nothing he could do to stop Suanna. Suanna wasn't a fool like Yin Tuoluo, who would not escape even if he couldn't win. Instead, he would fight recklessly, unwilling to admit defeat even if he were to die. Chapter 1347. In fact, Chu Xiu's attack on Suha just now was somewhat against the rules. According to the Daoist rules of the past, if someone came to make things difficult for you when you were establishing a sect, it was fine if you endured it. After all, it was a joyous occasion, and it was better to forgive people wherever possible. However, Chu Xiu was not that kind of person. Whoever made him unhappy, he would make them even more unhappy. Rules were made by people. The so-called Daoist rules were just something created by a sect that could not afford to lose. Chu Xiu had never cared about it. With his current strength and the strength of the entire Kunlun devil cult, even if he temporarily disregarded the rules, what could anyone do to him? Sure enough, when the people present saw Chu Xiu's attack, although they were surprised, no one stood up to say anything. Glancing at the blood on the square around him, Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Wash the ground." After a group of Kunlun devil cult martial artists cleaned up the square that was stained with blood at an extremely fast speed. Only then did Chu Xiu put on a kind smile, as if nothing had happened. He said to the crowd, "Everyone, please don't mind it. There will always be some thieves who can't bear to see others do well. They just have to jump out and cause trouble on a joyous occasion. However, it doesn't matter. The noise of a fly is not a big deal. Now that the annoying fellows are gone, the ceremony will continue." Chu Xiu's expression turned solemn, and he said in a deep voice, "The path of martial arts is rugged and long. Establishing a sect is to pass on the legacy, and also to gather everyone's strength to reach the peak of martial arts. My Kunlun devil cult educates without discrimination. As long as you have a heart for martial arts and want to reach the peak, you can join the cult. We practice martial arts and obtain power not to control the fate of others, but to prevent our own fate from being controlled by others." As soon as Chu Xiu's words came out, it immediately attracted the resonance of many small sections. For these small sects that were not strong and not too big in scale, they were sandwiched in the middle of the big sections. Although they looked very impressive on normal days, in reality, they could not control their own fate. Usually, a single decision made by those top sects would affect the future of their sections. Chu Xiu's words struck a chord in their hearts. Chu Xiu scanned the crowd and said in a deep voice, "Activate the sacred flame." As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, Grandmaster Yuan Ji and Chao Heng opened the array formation. Suddenly, the rootless sacred fire rushed up. In that instant, the martial artists from the small sects and schools felt that the might of the Kunlun demon cult was very strong. Although they did not feel anything abnormal, the expressions of the martial immortal level experts all changed. They could feel the power within the rootless sacred flame. It was the purest form of heaven and earth energy. This kind of thing was a treasure among treasures no matter where it was placed. For example, High Heaven Sect's Soaring Heaven Boundless Seal was similar, but the Soaring Heaven Boundless Seal was only refined from a part of the dragon vein, so in terms of real power, it was not comparable to the rootless sacred flame. At this sect founding ceremony, Chu Xiu could be said to have given many people a surprise. His own strength did not need to be mentioned. He was able to kill Yin Tuoluo. Regardless of Chu Xiu's realm, his combat power had at least reached between the 5th and 7th heavenly layers. The 3 battles just now also demonstrated the strength of the Kunlun devil cult's cultivators. They were definitely the cream of the crop among cultivators of the same level. They were the elites of the elites and had a huge force. Now that the rootless sacred flame appeared, it meant that Chu Xiu truly had the qualifications to become one of the top sects in the 4 domains. He had a heaven and earth divine object of his own. This kind of trump card could only be encountered by chance. For example, Cold River City was not weak, but they did not have such a thing. So, if their strength weakened in the future, they could only be destroyed. However, sects like High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion also had trump cards similar to the rootless sacred flame and used them. In the future, when their strength declined, they could still use it as a deterrent to perish together with their enemies. These 3 surprises were enough to make the newly established Kunlun Devil cult a top sect in the Eastern Domain that could stand shoulder to shoulder with High Heaven Sect. After that, Chu Xiu directly announced the start of the banquet. However, most of the people at the banquet ate tasteless food. They all ate hastily and left immediately after, going back to report the situation. Only that Long Shan of the Luoshan tribe was still there, eating. In fact, he even finished all the ingredients prepared by the Kunlun demon sect for the grand establishment ceremony. Only then did he reluctantly allow Xiao Wu to drag him away. The other outsiders had all left. The remaining cultivators from the small sects in the Eastern Domain and the rogue cultivators were still standing there. They looked at each other, not knowing what to say. At this time, Lin Fengwu suddenly stood up and bowed to Chu Xiu. "My 9 Phoenix Sword sect is willing to merge with Kunlun Devil cult and become its vassal sect. This subordinate is also willing to join Kunlun Devil cult and cut through thorns and thorns for Kunlun Devil cult. I am willing to die 10,000 times for Kunlun Devil cult." A smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. "Very good. From now on, your 9 Phoenix Sword sect can erect the sacred flame flag of my Kunlun Devil cult. In the future, your 9 Phoenix Sword sect will be a vassal sect of my Kunlun Devil cult. I also know your strength. You can directly join Kunlun Devil cult and choose any hall to cultivate. All cultivation methods and resources will be given to official disciples of Kunlun Devil cult." Seeing that Lin Fengwu stood up and even received praise from Chu Xiu and this level of treatment, some of the sect leaders present immediately slapped their thighs in regret. They had only hesitated for a moment, but they did not expect this girl to beat them to it. However, some of the martial artists from Fonglin County present sneered. It was useless even if they beat her to it. She was old friends with Cult Master Chu. Even if she was the last one, she would still receive this treatment. However, with the 9 Phoenix Sword sect taking the lead, the other martial artists also bowed their heads and worshipped, eager to join Kunlun Devil cult. These things were too complicated, so Chu Xiu directly threw them to Elder Wei and the others to deal with. Anyway, they had experience in dealing with these basic things. As the cult master, it was better for him to maintain a cold attitude. The things that happened at Kunlun Devil Cult's founding ceremony spread throughout the Daoist in a very short time. 3 wins, Chu Xiu's strong attitude, and the trump card that Kunlun Devil Cult revealed, all of these proved that Kunlun Devil Cult was not as simple as a simple newly established sect. Its power and foundation were comparable to those top sects that had been passed down for more than 10,000 years. Moreover, it did not have any sectarian bias, and its attitude of not rejecting anyone made it more attractive to those martial artists who were originally rogue cultivators and from small sections. This also led to many rogue cultivators from the southern and northern regions specifically coming to the eastern region to join Kunlun Devil Cult. Of course, there was no such thing in the western region. The group of monks was only divided into 2 factions. Unless they could no longer survive in the western region, they would never switch to other sections. Stargazing Pavilion, Northern Sky Pillar Mountain. At this moment, Feng Daochen, revered Qingwei, was telling Meng Xinghe in detail about the various things that happened when Kunlun Devil Cult was established. In the end, Feng Daochen concluded, I feel that Chu Xiu has already discovered the secret of destiny. When I congratulated him, I deliberately used the word destiny to test him. Although he did not show any abnormal reaction, I could feel that there was a slight change in his state of mind at that moment. Although it was only a very slight change, in my perception, it was like ripples on a lake, extremely obvious. However, Chu Xiu did not pose much of a threat to us. He actually announced in public that not only rogue cultivators can join the Kunlun Devil Cult, but those small families and small sects can also join the Kunlun Devil Cult. At this point, Feng Daochen laughed coldly and said, others may not know what those small sects and families are like, but do you think I don't know? Each and every one of them is a fence-sitter. As long as the Kunlun Devil Cult starts to decline, they will definitely be the first to run away. Meng Xinghe said lightly, actually, it is not surprising that Chu Xiu knows about the secret of destiny. I believe that many people already know about it. The Brahmin cult's leader knows about it, the world's revered one knows about it, and the Tao's revered one even knows about it. Feng Daochen asked doubtfully, then why didn't they make a move to snatch the destiny? Because the destiny is in their hands, why would they want to snatch it? Meng Xinghe waved his hand and drew countless rays of starlight in the air. He pointed at a ray of light and said, this is the Daoist sect's destiny, which is already in the hands of the Tao's revered one. If he wants to fight for the destiny of the entire Daoist sect, then he must defeat everyone and become the true number 1 Daoist expert. But he can't do it now, so what's the point of fighting for it? Don't place too much importance on destiny. Those who can reach the pinnacle are not chosen by destiny, but because destiny can only choose you. We are already a step behind, so we have to work hard to catch up. Feng Daochen nodded in understanding. But at this moment, Meng Xinghe suddenly said, but you said that Chu Xiu was wrong to annex those small sections. I don't agree with that. This move of Chu Xiu's is the biggest threat to my Galaxy Martial Arts Academy. Feng Daochen was stunned and asked, why? Meng Xinghe said coolly, what you said is right. Those small sects have no standpoint and are all some opportunists. But with Chu Xiu's power and influence now, do they have the chance to be opportunists? Do they dare to be two-sided? They don't dare. So as long as Chu Xiu is around, they will listen to him. Their own destiny is in the hands of Chu Xiu. 10,000 years is too long. The great calamity is coming, so we can only seize the day. I can't see what the future holds. Chu Xiu is a smart man. He has already grasped the present in his hands. Feng Daochen's eyes widened. Then what should we do? Chu Xiu is such a big threat. Do we need to call for the Ancient Venerables Assembly and use the various rules of the Ancient Venerables to deal with him? Meng Xinghe waved his hand and dispersed all the starlight in front of him. He said, there's no need. Because right now, there are people who can't wait for him to die. At the same time, on the sky-piercing sword peak of the World Sword Sect. After Mu Baishuang returned from the Kunlun Devil Cult, he saw Luo Shan and said, Sect Master, I suggest that we immediately attack the eastern region and eradicate the Kunlun Devil Cult. Chapter 1348. Mu Baishuang made such a choice not because he hated Chu Xiu, but because he was in a hurry. As long as Chu Xiu was not eliminated and the Kunlun devil cult existed, the sword sects would not be able to touch the East region. Luo Shan looked at Mu Baishuang calmly and asked, "What did you see? What's the reason?" Mu Baishuang, who had always been a man of few words, told Luo Shan everything he saw in the Kunlun devil cult in detail. In the end, Mu Baishuang said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu is not strong enough to make the sword sects and the south region fear him. However, his rate of growth was simply too shocking. The Kunlun devil cult is in the south region. If we don't get rid of them, the southern region will never be able to touch the east region." Luo Shan looked at Mu Baishuang in surprise. "It's rare to see you so afraid of someone." Mu Baishuang said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu is worth being afraid of. Of course, if the southern region doesn't want to touch the east region, no matter how strong Chu Xiu is, we don't need to be afraid of him." Luo Shan shook his head and said, "It seems that your thoughts are very similar." Mu Baishuang was stunned. "Us? Who else?" Luo Shan didn't say anything. He just waved his hand and an old man in a blue robe walked into the hall. "City Lord Yi." Mu Baishuang was shocked. He didn't expect to see Yi Weikong here. That's right, the person in front of them was the city lord of Cold River City, Yi Weikong, who hadn't appeared in the pugilistic world for a long time. When Chu Xiu held the founding ceremony and the entire Daoist heaven came to congratulate him, Yi Weikong had already come to the sword sect of the southern region alone. The reason for this was self-evident. Yi Weikong said indifferently, "Sword Lord Mu, do you only feel that Chu Xiu is worth being afraid of now? Unfortunately, it's too late." Mu Baishuang said in a deep voice, "It's not too late. It's just right. City Lord Yi, are you going to abandon the East region?" Yi Weikong suddenly roared with laughter, and his laughter was filled with rage and unwillingness. "Betray the Eastern region? What a joke, what a joke. The East Territory belongs to the High Heaven sect and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion, but it doesn't belong to my Cold River City. It was never mine, so why would I abandon it?" When Chu Xiu sent out the invitations and invited the 4 regions to attend the ceremony, Yi Weikong had already arrived at the sword sect of the world. In fact, although Yi Weikong had been lying low and recuperating in Cold River City because of Chu Xiu, he didn't have the idea of betraying the East region and joining hands with the martial arts world of the South region. It was none other than Chu Xiu who caused him to have such thoughts. It was Chu Xiu's decision to establish the Kunlun devil cult that caused Yi Weikong's mentality to become unbalanced. He was angry, unwilling, and even deeply jealous of Chu Xiu. In the past, when he established Cold River City, he fought against the High Heaven sect and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Under the premise that he joined hands with Meng Xinghe, he snatched the food from the 2 sects and laid the foundation of Cold River City. He couldn't even remember how much the Cold River City had to pay and how many casualties it had caused. But now? Why didn't the High Heaven sect and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion stop or make things difficult for Chu Xiu when he established the Kunlun devil cult? Why did they even send him congratulatory gifts? Yi Weikong knew that it was because the times had changed. At that time, he established Cold River City because of the internal strife in the East region and to snatch food from the High Heaven sect and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Now that Chu Xiu established the Kunlun devil cult, the 2 sects thought that it could protect the southern border's defense line and act as a barrier, so they didn't reject it. However, although Yi Weikong understood the reason, he couldn't swallow this resentment. Since the East region had never accommodated his Cold River City and treated him as one of their own, why should he do his best for the East region? The so-called East, West, South, North, and South regions were nothing more than geographical names. It didn't matter which region Cold River City was in. Luo Shan said in a deep voice, "City Lord Yi made a wise choice. The sword sect of the world is very pleased. The East region can't accommodate you, but the Southern Territory can. The sword sect of the world can." Yi Weikong said coldly, "This is not a wise choice. I was forced to make it. Sect Master Luo, the Cold River City will fully cooperate with the Southern Territories' attack on the East region, but I only ask for one thing. What is it? Kill Chu Xiu. Luo Shan paused and said, okay. The sword sect of the world and Chu Xiu didn't have any death feud. However, due to the difference in their positions, this battle to the death could be said to have been decided. At this time, Mu Baishuang suddenly said, Sect Master, the plan is revealed. We must succeed in this battle. But the Soaring Heavens sect has the Soaring Heavens seal, how confident are you? Mu Baishuang's attitude was very radical before, but after seeing Luo Shan's decision to attack the East region, he suddenly became cautious. This time was different. This was the first and last time the Southern Territory sects led by the Sword sect of the world would attack the East region with all their strength. If they succeeded, the Southern Territory sects would annex the East region and their power would increase greatly. If they lost, the Southern Territory sects would suffer a great loss, and they probably wouldn't be able to do anything in the era of great battles. So this time, they had to be very cautious. Luo Shan said indifferently, don't worry. I'm prepared to deal with the Soaring Heaven seal. I've integrated the Through Heaven sword. Hearing this, Mu Baishuang's expression changed. The Through Heaven sword was the inheritance treasure of the Sword sect of the world. Its origin was actually the same as the Soaring Heaven seal. It was made from a piece of fine iron born from the dragon vein. The Through Heaven sword existed in the lower realm. After it was brought to the Daoist Ocean by the Sword sect of the world, it was nourished on the Through Heaven sword. The Through Heaven sword could not be controlled by mortals. Moreover, the Through Heaven sword was a product of the lower realm's dragon vein, which had some conflict with the Daoist Ocean. Every time it was used, the backlash it brought could be said to be great. Luo Shan chuckled and said, why such a big reaction? I have been a failure in my life. I've been the #1 sword Dao cultivator in the world for hundreds of years. The Sword sect of the world went from 1 sword saint to 3 sword saints. By the way, there are 4 now. That brat Guixia also has the title of sword saint. When it comes to understanding the world, I'm not as good as the world exalt and the Sanskrit sect master, let alone the Dao master. I can't even compare to a rising star like Meng Xinghe. My realm of the 9th heaven was forcefully broken through by relying on my drive back then. In reality, it was very difficult. Others are chasing after the peak, but I can't even see where the peak is. Now that I'm old, I can still use the Through Heaven sword while I still have the last bit of drive left. If this drags on, I might not even have the right to use the Through Heaven sword. Of course, we can't be the only ones doing this. We have to find a few more people. Brother Sheng, I'll leave Divine General Zhenlong and Supremacy Guyu to you. They already have a legacy disciple. I'm afraid they won't be so easy to persuade this time. Xingjiu Yuan walked out of the inner hall and nodded expressionlessly. All right, give me some time. I'll bring them here. Mu Baishuang looked at all of this in a daze. So when he was still worried and apprehensive, the old sect master had already arranged everything. But why did all of this feel like he was making arrangements for his funeral? Mu Baishuang shook his head violently and said in a low voice, Sect Master, what do we do now? Luo Shan said in a low voice, wait for everyone to arrive. I've already sent Guixia to the Great Thousand sect and the Martial God sect. This time, we've gathered the strength of the 3 sects of the southern region, 3 prime sovereigns, and City Lord Yi of Cold River City as our spy. If we still can't break through the eastern region, we can only say that the southern region doesn't have the luck to do so. In the dense forest deep within the 100,000 mountain range, Su Tianya and Fang Baidu looked at Xingjiu Yuan in confusion in front of them. They didn't know why he had suddenly come to find them. Xingjiu Yuan had already stepped into the 7th martial immortal realm. His battle strength was slightly higher than theirs. Thus, although they were on friendly terms, it wasn't too much. Moreover, Xingjiu Yuan was a rather arrogant person. Most of the time, they were the ones who took the initiative to curry favor with Xingjiu Yuan. This was the first time Xingjiu Yuan had taken the initiative to find them. Brother Sheng, it's not easy for you to come here. Come, come, let's take a seat in the secret realm. I've cultivated a batch of nepenthe grass in the secret realm. The wine brewed from it can be said to be able to solve 1,000 worries with just 1 cup. Although Fang Baidu was puzzled as to why Xing Jiuyuan had taken the initiative to find them, he still politely invited Xing Jiuyuan to take a seat. However, Xing Jiuyuan shook his head and said, I'm not here as a guest today. I'm here to invite the 2 of you to attack the eastern region and destroy the Kunlun Devil Cult, High Heaven Sect, and Imperial Sky Pavilion. The 2 of you can avenge the death of your disciple. Similarly, after the sects of the southern region occupy the eastern region, the 2 of you can either obtain a batch of resources to cultivate in seclusion or directly establish a sect in the eastern region. Fang Baidu and Chen Jiulong looked at each other and remained silent. However, their attitudes were enough to explain everything. In the past, the enmity between them for killing their disciple was indeed irreconcilable. But now, they had accepted 2 new disciples. They were beautiful, cute, sensible, and intelligent. Their talents were much better than the previous 2 and their future achievements would even surpass theirs. To put it nicely, they now had fetters and were no longer willing to fight to the death. But to put it bluntly, they were afraid. They had been beaten so badly by Chu Xiu that they did not dare to find trouble with him. Although the 2 of them were not old, they were not young either. They had almost reached the end of their martial Dao cultivation in this lifetime. They could only hope for an outstanding disciple to inherit their mantle. Now that their goal had actually been achieved, why should they risk their lives to fight against a fierce person like Chu Xiu? Xing Jiuyuan frowned and said, this time, the World Sword Sect will take the lead. Sword Saint Luo Shan will take action. The Great Thousand Sect, War God's Sect, and I will also take action. Even the city lord of the Eastern Territories, Cold River City, Yi Weikong, will be a spy. Basically, it's in the bag. What are you afraid of? Fang Baidu smiled awkwardly and said, we're not afraid. We just don't think it's necessary. Brother Sheng, you should find someone else. Xing Jiuyuan's expression suddenly turned cold. He said, the 2 of you, the attack on the Eastern Territory and the spy from Cold River City are all confidential for the time being. Now that you've heard these secrets, you don't want to take action? Hearing these threatening words, Su Tianya and Fang Baidu's expressions suddenly sank. Chapter 1349. Although Xing Jiuyuan's sword Venerable Ling Tian's lineage had always been a level higher than theirs and Xing Jiuyuan's strength was stronger than theirs, it did not mean they were afraid of him. Su Tianya's face turned gloomy immediately when he heard the threatening words. Xing Jiuyuan, what do you mean? I've seen people taking revenge, but I've never seen someone forcing others to take revenge. Are you going to force us to come if we don't come? Your sword Venerable Ling Tian's lineage is indeed sharp. I would like to see if it can break through my golden dragon body. Xing Jiuyuan said faintly, don't get too worked up. I'm not threatening you. I'm just telling you the truth. Don't tell me the 2 of you haven't sensed the trend of the entire exalted heaven recently? Meng Xinghe had just become the leader of Gu Zun's lineage and established the Galaxy Martial Academy to recruit disciples without restraint. Chu Xiu's establishment of the Kunlun Devil Cult in the Eastern Territory had shaken the 4 territories. Now, the Southern Territory and Eastern Territory are going to war. Don't you know what this means? The era of great battles has already arrived. We, Gu Zun's lineage, are Gu Zun's to put it nicely, but we're just powerful itinerant cultivators. Martial immortals. Martial immortals, you just listen when others call you that. If you really think of yourselves as immortals, you won't even know how you died. In this era of great battles, do you really think that martial immortals can stay out of trouble? Meng Xinghe must have asked you to join the Galaxy Martial Academy before, but you rejected him. Now, I'm representing the Sword Sect in the Southern Territory to find you, but you rejected me. Do you still want to join Chu Xiu's side? You and I are both Gu Zuns, so I'm here to talk to you about this matter. After all, you and I have some friendship. However, if you don't agree, I won't get involved in this matter anymore. What the Sword Sect of the world will do is not something that I can control. I can only tell you that those swordsmen are not easy to deal with. In the past, in the lower realm, the World Sword sect had once killed 90% of their disciples and kept the elites alive. Their swords are sharp, but their hearts are even sharper and harder than their swords. After saying that, Xingjiu Yuan did not say anything else. He turned around and left. Behind him, Fang Baidu and Su Tianya's expressions changed several times. When Xingjiu Yuan's silhouette was about to disappear from their sight, Fang Baidu shouted, "Brother Sheng! Wait!" Xingjiu Yuan purposely did not leave as fast as he could. A smile appeared on his cold face. In the main hall of the World Sword sect, the current 4 sword honorables of the World Sword sect were gathered. Other than Sect Master Sword Exalted Luo Shan, there was also Exalted Sword Exalted Azure Dawn Mu Baishuang, Exalted Sword Exalted Jade Sea Exalted Mingjilan, who had just come out of seclusion, and Exalted Sword Exalted 9 Nether E Guixia, who had reached the 3rd heavenly layer of Martial Immortal in the Exalted Divine Palace. On the Battle God Sect side, the 6th Heaven Martial Immortal Sect Master, Heaven Battling Hierarch Mu Shinshao, and the Temple Master of the Divine War Temple, Sikong Jialua, had also arrived. The Great Thousand Sect was slightly weaker. Only Sect Master Tao Qianming had come. Xingjiu Yuan had also brought Su Tianya and Fang Baidu, as well as Yi Weikong from Cold River City. There were a total of 11 martial immortals in the hall. This powerful force even gave Su Tianya and Fang Baidu, who had been a little uneasy, some confidence and comfort. Long Longer and Luo Feiheng also stood behind Fang Baidu and Su Tianya. As the 2 personal disciples of the Gu Zun, they were naturally qualified to stand here and listen in. Even Fang Qi Shao was there. The 2 of them looked at each other with a strange look in their eyes. Chu Xiu had sent them undercover so that they could gather information and act at the critical moment. They had thought that they would have to stay for a long time. They did not expect to get a chance so soon. Yi Weikong was the first to speak. "Sect Master Luo, now that we are all here, what is the sword sect going to do? Anyway, Cold River City will cooperate fully." Luo Shan rubbed his head and said, "I'm getting old and my brain can't keep up. I've already discussed the plan with Baishuang. Let him speak." Everyone present looked at each other and revealed a thoughtful expression. No matter how old Luo Shan was, he could not possibly forget the plan he had made in advance, right? It could only be said that Luo Shan was already choosing a successor, and that successor was Mu Baishuang. Therefore, Luo Shan tried to give Mu Baishuang a chance to show his face and increase his prestige in front of everyone, deliberately pushing him to the front. Of course, this was the sword sect's own business and had nothing to do with them. Mu Baishuang said, "Now that we've teamed up, we have a total of 11 martial immortals. Logically speaking, we should be able to crush the eastern region. However, I'm certain that if we fight them head-on, we will definitely lose." Mu Shinshao of the Battle God sect frowned and said, "Aren't you overestimating the east region a little too much?" Mu Baishuang shook his head and said, "If we don't plan for the worst situation now, it will be too late to regret it if something unexpected happens. We will fight them directly. First, it will be easier to meet those barbarians through the southern barbaric land." After the founding ceremony of the Kunlun devil cult, everyone knew that Chu Xiu colluded with the barbarians, and he even controlled a large barbarian tribe. Therefore, if we pass through the southern barbaric land, it will be easy to be discovered by the barbarians. Then, the martial artists of the east region will be aware of it and be prepared. Even the south region is not a monolithic block. Don't forget about the Sky Devil Palace. They joined forces with Chu Xiu to destroy the Blissful Demon Palace, so they are already allies. Although I have already cleaned up the spies in the sword sect, I can't guarantee that I can clean them all. Once we move out on a large scale, it is very likely that we will be discovered. Mu Shinshao waved his hand and said, "This matter was led by the World Sword Sect. We also trust the World Sword Sect. Therefore, if you have any plans, Sword Master Mu, just tell us and we will all cooperate." Mu Baishuang said in a deep voice, "My plan can be summed up in one word, fast. Gather all the top forces and use the fastest speed to attack the east region, as fast as the wind and as fast as fire. And the key point of this plan lies with City Lord Yi and Brother Fong of the Cold River City. Fong Baidu said in surprise, "Me?" Mu Baishuang nodded and said, "Brother Fong, your Guyu clan has a secret technique called Shadow Shifting Moon. As long as you have the same array coordinates, you can tear the space under the moonlight and travel thousands of miles to the other side. As far as I know, the difficulty of this secret technique lies in the array coordinates that you have to set up on the other side. The array coordinates are extremely conspicuous, and it requires a lot of materials. Therefore, the Guyu clan only regards this secret technique as a quick way to return home. But here, we can use City Lord Ye's Cold River City as a cover, and let City Lord Yi return to the East region first to set up the array in Cold River City. All of us will use the Shadow Shifting Moon technique to cross thousands of miles into the East region, bypass the southern barbaric land, and attack the East region with Chu Shou." Fong Baidu wanted to say something, but in the end, he just opened his mouth and didn't say anything. The other party had already studied his secret technique so thoroughly, what else could he say? In his hands, this secret technique was only used to save time, but in the hands of the other party, it was a great killing weapon that could be used to cross thousands of miles and launch a surprise attack to destroy an entire clan. This might be the difference in their horizons. Mu Baishuang continued, "After entering Cold River City, we have no time to waste. We must defeat all the three forces in the East region at the same time. Among them, the High Heaven sect is the strongest, and they have the High Heaven Wuji seal. The Sword sect of the world will attack the High Heaven sect with Brother Sheng. The Imperial Sky Pavilion is already weak, but after all, they still have some trump cards, so we will leave it to the War God sect and the Great Thousand sect to attack. As for the Kunlun Devil cult's Chu Shou, although the other party has just established the sect, there are 3 martial immortals in the sect, and their strength should not be underestimated. City Lord Yi, I know the hatred between you and Chu Shou, so you will deal with the Kunlun Devil cult. Brother Fong and Brother Su, you two will help City Lord Yi to deal with the other 2 Kunlun Devil cult's martial immortals." Fong Baidu opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end, he still didn't say anything. In fact, he didn't want to face Chu Shou. After all, Chu Shou's strength was obvious. After several consecutive conflicts, he even had a fear of Chu Shou. But now that he had decided to attack, he naturally couldn't delay, or he would offend both sides. In the end, Mu Baishuang said in a deep voice, "Since no one has any doubts, Brother Fong, please give the method of setting up the formation coordinates to City Lord Yi. When City Lord Yi has set up the formation coordinates, we will immediately attack." After that, the crowd dispersed and began to prepare. The Shadow Shifting Moon secret skill of the Guyu lineage was not too high-end, because only the Guyu lineage, and even Gu Zun in the martial immortal realm could use it, so it was not universal. Fong Baidu was not worried even if it spread to the entire Jianghu. Therefore, he gave the secret skill to Yi Weikong without hesitation. When he returned to the residence that the World Sword sect had arranged for him, he found Long Longer playing with some small insects. Fong Baidu couldn't help but frown and said, "What are these?" Long Longer smiled and said, "These are yearning cicadas. They were a pair when they were buried deep in the ground, and they will never leave each other in this life. No matter how far apart they are, the 2 cicadas can sense each other's existence. Even if there are mountains and rivers in the way, they will still find each other. Master, don't you think this is very touching?" Fong Baidu knew that Long Longer knew Gu, because she had inherited it before. However, Fong Baidu was still not used to playing with these insects. Hearing this, he just said, "It's touching, but Gu is only a minor skill. If you have time, you should practice the secret skills of the Guyu lineage. You are a girl, how can you always play with insects?" After that, Fong Baidu left directly to prepare the formation. Behind him, Long Longer had an unfathomable smile on her face, and she generously released the yearning cicada in her hand. The yearning cicada, which was refined with the Gu of the moon-worshipping cult, was extremely fast. It turned into a golden light and disappeared in an instant. Chapter 1350. Southern Barbarian Kunlun Devil Cult. Wei Shuya and the others were all present. Chu Xiu held the lovesickness cicada in his hand with a playful look in his eyes. He had told longer before that Fang Baidu and Su Tianya were not a cause for concern, so there was no need to be too anxious to send him a message if something happened. But if someone was prepared to join forces to deal with him, they would most likely look for Fang Baidu and Su Tianya, the two ancient sovereigns who had a grudge against him. But what Chu Xiu didn't expect was that right after he established the Kunlun demon sect, there were already people preparing to act against him. Seemed like this bunch of fellows really couldn't bear to see him living a good life. Did he have to attract so much hatred? Chu Xiu took out another lovesickness cicada from the space box. The two lovesickness cicadas finally met and immediately hugged each other, rubbing against each other's ears and temples. The cicada wings behind them touched and let out a series of screeches, which actually converged into a human voice and told the news that Longer wanted to bring to Chu Xiu. After listening, Chu Xiu put away the two lovey-dovey lovesickness cicadas and said with a smile, "I was thinking too much. The main target of the World Sword Sect this time is not me, but the entire Eastern Territory. I am just a stepping stone for them to attack the Eastern Territory." Ji Xinlua hurriedly said, "Religion Master, even if you are a stepping stone, you are the hardest one." After Ji Xinlua surrendered to the Kunlun Devil Cult, he had no way out, so Chu Xiu could use him without worry. However, Chu Xiu didn't know if it was because cultivators from the Sanskrit religion received a different education from ordinary cultivators, but listening to this group of people, Chu Xiu always felt a little awkward. Just like now, Ji Xinlua was clearly trying to flatter him, but why did Chu Xiu feel so awkward listening to him? Mei Qinglian asked, "So what are you going to do now?" "High Heaven Sect is our primary target. Should we inform High Heaven Sect first?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's too late. The World Sword Sect is thousands of miles away from my Kunlun Devil Cult. You all know the speed of Acacia Cicada. After all, it is a voodoo. Even if it is refined by the moon-worshipping cult's secret method, its speed is only equivalent to a real pellet state martial artist. Therefore, it has already been a month since they came here from the Sword Sect of the world. I guess they have already arrived at the Cold River City and are ready to take action. Besides, even if there was enough time, why would they help High Heaven Sect? I've saved them once, and I don't intend to save them again." Last time, Chu Xiu had gone to save Fang Yinglong. At that time, Chu Xiu's strength wasn't strong enough, and he didn't have enough influence. Once Fang Yinglong died, the eastern domain would definitely be plunged into the flames of war, and no one would be able to stop the sects of the southern domain. Later, High Heaven Sect chose to admit the existence of the Kunlun Devil Cult for the same reason, which was to let the Kunlun Devil Cult be a barrier of the southern barbaric land and help them resist the big sects of the southern domain. In fact, there was no friendship between the two sides. Everything was just the best choice for the benefit. Now that a disaster was imminent, of course, they had to rely on their own means. If High Heaven Sect couldn't defend the Eastern Domain, his Kunlun Devil Cult didn't mind defending the Eastern Domain on behalf of High Heaven Sect. Looking at the crowd in front of him who were on guard, Chu Xiu showed a smile on his face and said, "I say, everyone, don't be so nervous. This time, it is not only a threat to us, but it may also be an opportunity, a big opportunity. My Kunlun Devil Cult has been in the Eastern Domain for so long, and we can share the world with High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion, but why can't we become the strongest? As long as we use the crisis properly, it can become an opportunity." Everyone was thinking about what Chu Xiu meant, but at this time, another lovesickness cicada flew in. Chu Xiu took out another lovesickness cicada and watched the two cicadas show off their love. This time, the message was sent from Cold River City. 3 days ago, the people of World Sword Sect had arrived at Cold River City, and now they were probably on their way. Chu Xiu looked around at everyone present and said in a deep voice, "Shrink the defense line and activate the spirit array. Old Wei, please take people to gather all the disciples in the lower realm. Except for some of the disciples who are guarding, bring the rest to the upper realm. Yuan Ji, Chao Ying, activate the rootless sacred fire array. If necessary, use the power of the rootless sacred fire to defend against the enemy. After a series of orders were issued, Mei Qinglian suddenly asked, "You don't seem to be doing this just for defense." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Of course it's not just for defense. As I said, this time is both a crisis and an opportunity. If we make good use of it and kill Yi Weikong, Cold River City will be ours, and the entire eastern domain will be ours." 3 days ago, in Cold River City, when Fang Baidu teleported everyone to Cold River City with the secret method of shadow shifting and moon shifting, he almost passed out from exhaustion. He had only used this secret method for one person before, but this time, he had to transfer hundreds of people. Even a martial immortal like him was almost exhausted by this kind of consumption. Fortunately, the plan of World Sword Sect was to launch a surprise attack with only a part of the elite martial artists to defeat the high-level combat power of the enemy, and then gather a large number of martial artists of the southern domain to launch a frontal attack. If the World Sword Sect wanted him to teleport everyone here, Fang Baidu would definitely not agree to it on the spot. Luo Shan looked at everyone present and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, let's not waste any more time. I hope that the next time we meet, the entire eastern domain will be in our hands." Everyone present nodded and began to leave in 3 different directions. Among them, Cold River City was the slowest, because Yi Weikong still needed to gather those disciples and directly mobilize the power of the entire Cold River City to attack the Kunlun devil cult. The target of Luo Shan and the others was the entire eastern domain, but Yi Weikong's target was only Chu Xiu. Long Longer released a few acacia cicadas at the side. Even Luo Feiheng admired her calm attitude. Previously, Luo Feiheng was still wondering how Long Longer was going to release the goo insects. However, Long Longer released them so openly, and no one noticed it. This surprised Luo Feiheng, and made him feel that he was crushed in terms of intelligence. In Long Longer's words, the best way to be a spy was not to think of yourself as a spy. Many people knew that she knew goo. What was wrong with playing with cute little insects? Moreover, she was confident in her goo. Even if a martial immortal got hold of her goo insects, he would not be able to find any information from them. Luo Feiheng moved closer to Long Longer and asked, "I say, I'm going to make a move later. Why do I still feel a little uncomfortable? To be honest, that old man Su Tianya is really nice to me. He even took out his secret dragon blood wine and let me drink it like water. Now that I'm going to stab him in the back, I really can't bear to do it." Long Longer stretched her body and lightly leaned on Luo Feiheng. She said, "Oh? Could it be that Cult Master Chu doesn't treat you well?" Luo Feiheng rolled his eyes and took the opportunity to hug Long Longer. She was fragrant and soft, and it felt really good. Seeing that Long Longer didn't react, she said, "Of course Chu Xiu treats me well. In fact, in this world, there are very few people who treat me well. You might not know, but back then, my clansmen, my blood relatives, wanted to exchange me for the protection of Xiangshuaying clan. They traded me like a commodity. It was Chu Xiu, Mo Tianlin, and the others who saved me even though they were far weaker. Therefore, other than them, my teacher and foster father Mo Yezi in the Jixia Martial Arts Academy, no one else treats me well. Now that old man Su Tianya is so nice to me, I can't bear to see him like that. Speaking of which, don't you feel it?" Long Longer smiled and said, "Fang Baidu treats me as his only successor, so of course he treats me well. But I'm slightly stronger than you. Those people in moon-worshipping cult treat me well. Although Dong Wang Tai doesn't like me and often speaks coldly, if something happens to me, he will definitely save me with all his might. High Priest and I are both Miao clansmen, and he treats me like a daughter. Cult Master, not Cult Master Chu, but Cult Master Yi. Although he rarely speaks, he has been paying attention to me since the day I became the Saintess, fearing that the goo of longevity in my body would break out. Therefore, I know that my roots are always in moon-worshipping cult. Moreover, Cult Master Chu saved my life, so I will definitely do what he asked me to do. Don't worry, don't be so conflicted. There are many things in this world that can't be perfect. It's not easy to live up to your own conscience. When the time comes, you can act according to the circumstances. Maybe the situation won't be as bad as you think. Before Luo Feiheng could say anything, she heard footsteps coming from outside the door. This made Luo Feiheng shut his mouth immediately. Fang Baidu pushed the door open and saw the two girls hugging each other. He didn't find it strange. It was normal for girls to be intimate with each other. Therefore, he just coughed and said, "All right, let's stop chatting. The people in Cold River City are ready to take action. We have to set off. By the way, Ling, take this. Only use it at the critical moment." As he said this, Fang Baidu stuffed a crescent jade object into Long Ling's hands. The texture was exquisite and white. It looked more like an accessory than a weapon. Fang Baidu said in a deep voice, "This is the inherited secret treasure of my Gu lineage, the illusory moon wheel. It can pull oneself into the space. Unless the opponent can tear the space rule, they can't break it. If you attack, you can also trap your opponent within. The space inside is equivalent to a small secret realm, and it's sturdy." At this time, Su Tianya also walked in. He handed a dragon scale to Luo Feiheng and said, "This is the secret dragon scale armor of my dragon-subduing divine general lineage. It is made from the scale of a real dragon. Activate it with your own blood, and it can turn into armor and attach to your body. As long as your blood is not used up, the armor will always exist. This battle will be very dangerous. If necessary, use these trump cards." Two of their disciples were killed by Chu Xiu. This was a lesson for them. Therefore, this time, just in case, they directly took out their trump cards and stuffed them into their hands. This was to prevent any accidents from happening to their new disciples. Luo Feiheng and Long Ling looked at each other with the items in their hands. There was a complicated look in their eyes. Chapter 1351. In the High Heaven sect, Fang Yinglong and the other two martial immortals were cultivating. After returning from the founding ceremony of the Kunlun Devil cult, they had been cultivating hard. In fact, the establishment of the Kunlun Devil cult had no impact on the current High Heaven sect. Instead, it was beneficial. The stronger Chu Xiu's strength was, the more he would become a target in the southern barbaric land, attracting more targets and buying time for High Heaven sect. Now, Fang Yinglong and the others were cultivating so eagerly because they had a feeling that the era of Great War was coming. Although Fang Yinglong was an 8th Heaven Martial Immortal, there was only a thin line between him and the peak 9th Heaven Martial Immortal. He only hoped that he could improve further before the era of Great War. Only then would he be qualified to ensure the inheritance of the High Heaven sect and compete with the other 3 territories. But at this moment, a disciple knocked on the door of their seclusion room. Fang Yinglong opened the door and said with some dissatisfaction, "Didn't I say not to disturb us during this time? What happened outside?" The disciple said in panic, "Sect Master, the World Sword sect is here." Fang Yinglong was taken aback, then quickly asked, "What about the Kunlun Devil cult? Have they already started fighting with the Kunlun Devil cult?" Fang Yinglong subconsciously thought that the World Sword sect was attacking from the southern barbaric land, so they had already started fighting with the Kunlun Devil cult. The disciple shook his head and said, "Sect Master, there's nothing to do with the Kunlun Devil cult. The World Sword sect used some unknown method to bypass the Kunlun Devil cult and appeared in the hinterland of the Eastern Territory. They are already approaching High Heaven City." "What? Are you sure it's the World Sword sect?" Fang Yinglong was shocked. The disciple nodded and said, "It's the World Sword sect. But there are only experts from the World Sword sect. No other disciples were found. There are less than 100 people in total." Fang Yinglong suddenly let out a long sigh. He was wrong. The era of Great War had already begun. Outside High Firmament City, all the disciples guarding outside had already retreated into High Firmament City. The light of the array had already enveloped the entire city. After the martial artists of the Sword sect of the Under the Heaven Sword sect left the Cold River City, they traveled in the air at their fastest speed. Finally, it took them a few days to reach the High Heaven City. Although it was inevitable that they would be discovered by High Heaven sect cultivators stationed in other places along the way, it didn't matter. In just a few days, High Heaven sect wouldn't be able to arrange anything. Looking at the majestic high firmament city in front of him, Luo Shan suddenly said, I haven't been to the eastern region for over 100 years. Xingjiu Yuan said, it seems like sect master Luo has long been confident that one day, you will be able to take over the eastern region. At that time, you can look at your own things however you want. Luo Shan shook his head and said, no, it's because I'm too lazy to go out. Xingjiu Yuan was stunned. He did not expect Luo Shan to give such an answer. Luo Shan sighed deeply and said, a swordsman is sharp. I was the same when I was young. With a sword in hand, I was fearless. Now that I'm old, I have more things to worry about, so I'm not as sharp as before. The Eastern Territory is the obsession of the sword sect of the Under the Heaven Sword sect. Since the war 500 years ago, which caused the strength of the Eastern Territory to decline greatly, my master has always wanted to break through the Eastern Territory and let the sword sect of the Under the Heaven Sword sect cross over two territories. This is the obsession of the sword sect of the Under the Heaven Sword sect, but it's not my obsession. The era of great battles has arrived. I didn't make it in time for the war 500 years ago, and I probably won't be able to make it in time for the prosperous or chaotic world 500 years later. What I can do is to lay the best foundation for the sword sect of the Under the Heaven Sword sect in this era of great battles. Brother Sheng, your branch has been friends with the Under the Heaven Sword sect for generations. If something happens to the sword sect of the Under the Heaven Sword sect in the future, I'll have to trouble you to protect the lineage of the Under the Heaven Sword sect. Before the war, Luo Shan said that these things would actually affect the morale of the troops and seemed very inauspicious. However, he said it so naturally. Of course, only Xingjiu Yuan heard it. While the two of them were talking, High Heaven City shone brightly and a door in the spirit array opened. Fang Yinglong, Qin Baiyuan, and Linghu Xianshan appeared together. Fang Yinglong said gloomily, I really didn't expect that your Under the Heaven Sword sect would have the ability to bypass the southern barbaric land and directly attack the hinterland of my High Heaven sect. Although your southern territory sects have been eyeing my eastern territory for a long time, aren't you afraid that you won't be able to return with such a hasty operation this time? My High Heaven City isn't that easy to break through. Once the Kunlun Devil Cult, Imperial Sky Pavilion, and Cold River City get the news, they won't just sit back and watch my High Heaven sect be broken through. Luo Shan shook his head and said to Qin Baiyuan, Brother Qin, as early as 100 years ago, you and I have interacted the most. You should know my character. If I didn't have 100% certainty, do you think I would make a move? This sect leader of yours is a little too simple-minded. A trace of anger appeared on Fang Yinglong's face. Qin Baiyuan, who was beside him, pulled him back and said in a deep voice, there is indeed something wrong with this matter. Only the people of the World Sword sect, Battle God sect and Great Thousand sect are missing. As forces of the Southern Territory, once the Under the Heaven Sword sect decided to attack the Eastern Territory, Battle God sect and Great Thousand sect had no reason to be absent. But now, these two sects were nowhere to be seen. It was easy to imagine where they went. Luo Shan shook his head gently and said, forget it. At this time, I won't hide it from you. My Under the Heaven Sword sect is determined to win this battle and we are fully prepared. Battle God sect and Great Thousand sect have gone to Imperial Sky Pavilion. Now they can't take care of themselves. As for the Kunlun Devil Cult, Chu Xiu has offended too many people. Naturally, someone will go and deal with him. As for Cold River City, he is the one who will go and deal with Chu Xiu. If there is no insider, how can we suddenly appear in the Eastern Territory? Fang Yinglong's face suddenly became gloomy. If he had known earlier, he would have directly killed Yi Weikong back then. Otherwise, he wouldn't have betrayed the entire Eastern domain. Luo Shan continued, among the 4 major sects of the Eastern Territory, 1 has rebelled and surrendered, and 3 have been surrounded. Is there any need to persist? If High Heaven sect is willing to surrender and seal their cultivation, I will return your freedom after 50 years. Fang Yinglong was so angry that he laughed. Luo Shan, you're under the Heaven Sword sect wants to attack High Heaven sect with such a small number of people? Do you really think you can defeat my High Heaven sect? Following Fang Yinglong's words, the soaring heavens Wuji seal behind him rose from the city. Moreover, it began to change in mid-air and began to expand crazily. In the end, it had even expanded to the size of soaring heaven city, appearing extremely terrifying. Luo Shan chuckled, soaring heaven seal. Hee hee. The next moment, a ray of sword chi soared into the sky, as if dividing the world into two halves. An ancient sword floated in midair. That sword seemed to have fused with the world's sharpness. Through heaven sword. Fang Yinglong's heart sank. Of course, he had heard of the through heaven sword. However, the soaring heaven seal was not necessarily inferior to the through heaven sword. But the key problem was that he, an 8th heaven martial immortal, was controlling the soaring heaven seal, while Luo Shan, a 9th heaven martial immortal, was controlling the through heaven sword. This gap of one heaven was not something the cards in their hands could make up for. I will ask you one last time. Is your High Heaven sect going to surrender or not? Fang Yinglong laughed wildly. Surrender? 10,000 years ago and 10,000 years later, my High Heaven sect has never surrendered. As Fang Yinglong's voice fell, the soaring heaven seal in his hands smashed down with a momentum that could shatter mountains and rivers. Luo Shan sighed softly and said indifferently, do it. The through heaven sword instantly slashed out 10,000 rays of light, tearing the sky and shattering the earth. Just as High Heaven sect and the Under the Heaven Sword sect began to fight, the Imperial Sky Pavilion and the War God sect and the Great Thousand sect also began to fight. Compared to High Heaven sect, the Imperial Sky Pavilion was in an even worse situation. They only discovered their opponents when they were at their doorstep. As a result, the Imperial Sky Pavilion's spirit array was destroyed by Tao Qianming of the Great Thousand sect. Only then did they start to fight back. They were facing 3 martial immortals, especially Mu Shinshao, the War God sect master. Zhong Qiushui was no match for them at all. If it were not for the few trump cards passed down in the Imperial Sky Pavilion, they would not have been able to hold on until now. In the end, Zhong Qiushui even used their Imperial Sky Pavilion's most precious treasure, the Imperial Heaven Sword, to barely repel the opponents. But Zhong Qiushui was almost exhausted. An elder walked up to Zhong Qiushui and whispered, Pavilion Master, we can't hold on any longer. Tao Qianming destroyed most of the spirit array, and the disciples of the Great Thousand sect are still breaking it. We can't even keep up with the speed at which they break it. If this goes on, once the spirit array is broken, we will really be annihilated. The Southern Territory's attack on the Eastern Territory is not just a matter of mine. Hurry up and ask the Kunlun Devil Cult and High Heaven sect for help. Zhong Qiushui smiled miserably. It's not as simple as you think. The War God sect and the Great Thousand sect were able to sneak in here and attack my Imperial Sky Pavilion. Where is the World Sword sect? The other party is coming for the entire eastern region, not for the Imperial Sky Pavilion, which is already in decline. I can guarantee that the High Heaven sect and the Kunlun Devil Cult have already started fighting. Then what should we do? Zhong Qiushui's eyes flashed fiercely. What should we do? Nothing. My Imperial Sky Pavilion has seen all kinds of storms, how can we fall here? Keep your spirits up, fight to the end, hold on to the end. If the High Heaven sect or the Kunlun Devil Cult win, they will naturally come to support us. If they don't come, the Eastern Territory will be defeated, and our Imperial Sky Pavilion will not be able to hold on alone. Over the years, our Imperial Sky Pavilion has had disciples who died in battle, but there has never been a coward who begged for mercy. As Zhong Qiushui's roar rang out, the momentum of the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion suddenly rose. Relying on their courage, they repelled another wave of attacks from the other side. However, even Zhong Qiushui himself didn't know how long this bravery could last. Chapter 1352. Zhong Qiushui's guess was wrong. The Kunlun Devil Cult hadn't fought with anyone at this time, because the speed of Cold River City was slow. Yi Weikong had made up his mind this time. He directly brought all the elite martial artists of Cold River City. There were thousands of people, so their speed would inevitably be slowed down. However, after entering the southern barbaric land, Yi Weikong felt that something was wrong. It was quiet, too quiet. Initially, they were prepared to charge straight in, penetrating through Chu Xiu's territory. But in the end, along the way, they didn't even meet a single resistance. The people from the Kunlun demon sect had long retreated. Fang Baidu frowned and said, looking at the traces in those strongholds, the people of the Kunlun devil cult should have long withdrawn, and they even withdrew in an orderly manner, without the slightest appearance of being in a hurry. But we just arrived at Cold River City a few days ago. Could it be that the news was leaked? City Lord Yi, could it be that there are spies of the Kunlun devil cult in your Cold River City? Fang Baidu was originally unwilling to deal with Chu Xiu, and he was forced to come. At this time, seeing that something was wrong, his tone of speech was naturally not so polite. Yi Weikong snorted coldly and said, so what if the Kunlun devil cult knows in advance? In the face of absolute strength, what can they do? Setting up a formation trap and ambush? It's just a small trick. You too, since you have come to this step, don't think about being half-hearted. Now, go all out and get rid of Chu Xiu. Fang Baidu and Su Tianya looked at each other and didn't say anything. Anyway, this battle was led by Yi Weikong. With him, an expert in the seventh heaven of martial immortal realm, it was not their turn to attack. The people of Cold River City pushed all the way to the headquarters of the Kunlun devil cult, but there was still no movement from the Kunlun devil cult. Yi Weikong frowned. Just as he was about to order the formation masters under the command of Cold River City to investigate the formation and break it first, in the next moment, countless flames soared into the sky and the surroundings. The white flames, which seemed to have no temperature, enveloped all the martial artists of Cold River City. The flames hung in the air, and all the power of rules around them was blocked. This was the rootless sacred fire of the Kunlun devil cult. Combining the power of the formation of the upper and lower worlds, and the formation masters like Master Yuan Ji and Chao Ying, the Kunlun devil cult's application of the rootless sacred fire had actually surpassed that of 500 years ago. Yi Weikong, it seems that you haven't suffered enough at that time. You dare to come to trouble me. But this time, you're bound to be unable to return. Chu Xiu and a group of martial artists from Kunlun demon cult appeared in front of the gate. They stood in formation, staring at the martial artists from Cold River City with stern eyes. Chu Xiu and a group of martial artists of the Kunlun devil cult all appeared in front of the gate. They were ready to fight, staring at the martial artists of Cold River City with stern eyes. Yi Weikong scolded, "What are you panicking for? So what if you are surrounded here? Kill Chu Xiu and destroy the Kunlun devil cult. Then, you will naturally be able to get out." As the founder of the Cold River City, Yi Weikong's power and influence in the Cold River City was considerable. His words immediately stabilized the emotions of those martial artists of Cold River City present. Turning to look at Chu Xiu, Yi Weikong said coldly, "Suffer losses? Chu Xiu, your strength is indeed good, but it is a pity that you always think yourself infallible and play those shameful tricks." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "But it's precisely because of those schemes that can't be put on the table that you, Yi Weikong, only dare to come looking for trouble with me now with the help of the sword sect of the world. Borrowing the power? If you didn't borrow the power of the High Heavens sect last time, do you think the Daoist would still have you, Chu Xiu, and the Kunlun devil cult? I'm also at fault. My fault is that I shouldn't have hesitated so much and should have killed you directly." A trace of intense hatred appeared on Yi Weikong's face as he said coldly, "All right, I've wasted enough time talking nonsense with you. I hope the High Heavens sect hasn't been destroyed after I kill you. I also want to see Fang Yinglong's expression in person and let him know how wrong his choice was." In the entire East Domain, besides Chu Xiu, Yi Weikong hated the High Heavens sect and Fang Yinglong the second most. He didn't hate Fang Yinglong for seriously injuring him. He only hated that Fang Yinglong didn't give him a chance to suppress the Cold River City, but now he recognized the status of the Kunlun devil cult. He just wanted to let Fang Yinglong know that if the High Heavens sect recognized the status of the Cold River City, perhaps there wouldn't be so many problems now. Get into formation and get ready to attack. After giving an order to the cultivators of the Cold River City, Yi Weikong tore off his brocade robe, revealing a silver-white armor. It was personally made by Meng Xinghe in the past. Since the situation in the Cold River City began to stabilize, except for the battles that decided the fate of the Cold River City, Yi Weikong hadn't worn this armor for a long time. Yi Weikong took a step forward, and his aura began to rise continuously until it reached the level of the 8th heavenly layer. This scene immediately caused Chu Xiu's expression to change slightly. This was a variable. Since Yi Weikong was seriously injured by Fang Yinglong, he hadn't appeared in the Jianghu. Not only Chu Xiu, but other cultivators also thought that Yi Weikong must be in seclusion to recuperate. Who would have thought that he could take this opportunity to step into the 8th heavenly layer of martial immortal? Chu Xiu now had the cultivation of the 3rd heavenly layer, but his combat power was between the 4th heavenly layer and the 6th heavenly layer. Yin Tuoyuo, who was able to threaten the 7th heavenly layer, died in his hands. The palace master of the Peacock Divine Palace, Su Hana, who had the cultivation of the 6th heavenly layer, was inferior to Chu Xiu in a head-on battle, apart from having a deeper foundation in power. So, now that a 7th heavenly layer cultivator had come, Chu Xiu also had the confidence to fight him. In the end, who would have thought that Yi Weikong would take the opportunity of recuperating to step into the 8th heavenly layer? This was a huge variable. The gap between the 8th heavenly layer, 3rd heavenly layer, and 5th heavenly layer was enough to make people despair in terms of power. Endless bone-chilling wind lingered around Yi Weikong, and the entire weather instantly darkened. The power of rules stirred the surrounding heaven and earth, causing the range of the formation to instantly change from the southern barbaric land, where the 4 seasons were summer, to the bone-chilling north. Of course, Yi Weikong could only affect the range of the formation. Outside the formation, due to the obstruction of the rootless sacred flame, even if Yi Weikong attacked with his full strength, there was no way to reverse the power of the rootless sacred flame with the power of rules. In mid-air, the endless ice storm in Yi Weikong's hand turned into a ferocious roaring ice dragon in his hand, and it roared towards Chu Xiu. Su Tianya, who was at the back, saw Yi Weikong attack. He also subconsciously prepared to attack, but he was stopped by Fang Baidu. Why are you in such a hurry to attack? There are still 2 martial immortal existences on Chu Xiu's side. Even if we attack, we may not be able to take them down. Let's wait and see who wins and who loses in the end before attacking. Su Tianya said in surprise, that's an 8th heaven martial immortal. Do you still think Chu Xiu can win? Fang Baidu shook his head and said, not necessarily. Anyway, I have a feeling of uneasiness when I attack this time. Maybe something will happen in the end. At that moment, Chu Xiu was directly facing Yi Weikong. The powerful force made his expression extremely grave. The 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet on Chu Xiu's right arm shone with a golden halo, and the 6 Saha wondrous light wheels were unleashed. The ice dragon was trapped in the 6 paths of reincarnation in midair, and the 6 paths of reincarnation kept grinding and killing it. Yi Weikong snorted coldly, it's just a small trick. As his voice fell, Yi Weikong grabbed the dragon's tail with one hand and pulled out an ice dragon spear from the dragon's tail. The dragon's spear flickered with an ice blue color that resembled flowing water. It was illusory and magnificent. It was an existence completely condensed by the power of rules. The dragon's spear stabbed out. It was just a simple stab and a flick, but it had already unleashed the essence of the spear technique to the extreme. It directly tore the 6 paths of reincarnation plate apart. Seeing that, Chu Xiu's heart sank. The difference between an existence at the 8th heaven martial immortal and him was not as simple as the difference in their foundation. Instead, their comprehension of the power of rules was no longer on the same level. Yi Weikong could already directly extract the power of rules and completely materialize it. This kind of control over the power of rules was obviously much higher than Chu Xiu's. The dragon spear swept over and smashed down towards Chu Xiu with a monstrous aura. The bone-piercing cold wind was mixed with endless murderous intent. In the next moment, Chu Xiu stepped into the air. His entire body was enveloped by pitch-black apocalyptic fire. The formation-breaking saber slashed out. The heaven-devouring saber momentum was like a huge black hole, devouring any power within it. Moreover, it was unknown when the apocalyptic fire had already been mixed in the saber momentum. It spread in the black hole like maggots attached to bones, coiling along the saber momentum towards the dragon spear. Ear-piercing explosions were heard continuously. The pure power of rules on the dragon spear was actually melted and extinguished by the apocalyptic fire. Moreover, the apocalyptic fire vaguely carried a different kind of power. Nirvana to the extreme was rebirth. In the coldness of death, there was a hint of vitality. In the endless Gangqi storm, a green seed bloomed. As the petals bloomed, a huge demonic shadow broke free from it. Creation heavenly demon. The demonic shadow, which seemed to cover the sky, opened its arms and wanted to envelop Yi Weikong. However, in the next moment, Yi Weikong stretched out his hand and waved. Countless icy sword auras appeared in the void. Each sword aura was the materialization of the power of rules. In an instant, the creation heavenly demon was riddled with holes. Yi Weikong frowned and looked at Chu Xiu. This isn't your power. Chu Xiu said calmly, what I can use is naturally my power. In fact, it could be said that the series of changes just now was not Chu Xiu's power. Because when he killed Yin Tuoluo, he had learned the other party's extreme world annihilation flame. However, Chu Xiu did not intend to control that kind of extreme power. Therefore, Chu Xiu added some of the creation heavenly demon's creation power into it. The series of changes in power could be said to be infinitely close to divine power. Unfortunately, it still could not do anything to Yi Weikong's overwhelming power. Chapter 1353. In fact, Yi Weikong had never underestimated Chu Xiu. Back then, he had been tricked so badly by Chu Xiu. If he really underestimated Chu Xiu, he was actually looking down on himself. Although Yi Weikong had said that Chu Xiu wasn't worth mentioning, he hadn't held back at all when he'd attacked. He'd used his full strength. But in the end, he was still blocked by Chu Xiu. He realized that he had underestimated Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu, no matter whose power you used, today is a great calamity for you. You can't escape. If you surrender, I can guarantee that the subordinates of the Kunlun devil cult will not be killed. But if you insist on being brave, after I kill you, I will definitely slaughter the Kunlun devil cult. Chu Xiu's face revealed a sinister smile. Yi Weikong, sometimes being too confident is not a good thing. You want to slaughter the Kunlun devil cult? I will slaughter your Cold River City right now. Everyone, attack. Kill. Following Chu Xiu's order, the people of the Kunlun devil cult who were still in a stalemate immediately charged forward. With the current power of the Kunlun devil cult, Cold River City was not a match for them if the high-end battle forces of both sides were not taken into account. Especially not long ago, when Chu Xiu annexed a large number of loose cultivators and small sects in the eastern region. Although these people's strength was not much, when they joined forces, they were not weak. At least, it would be very easy for them to take care of Cold River City. You're courting death. Yi Weikong's eyes revealed a horrifying murderous intent. He formed a seal with his hands and in that instant, the sky above distorted. The entire sky was frozen and turned into a huge mountain that smashed down. Divine ability, Ice God Meteor. A martial immortal of the eighth heaven unleashed his divine ability with all his strength. The entire scene was like the end of the world. The iceberg, which looked like a floating continent, was aimed directly at the Kunlun devil cult. The core of the formation was also within the Kunlun devil cult. If something went wrong, the entire Kunlun devil cult would be completely smashed by the enemy. On the other side, Chu Xiu used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. His Dharma idol that was thousands of zhang tall was able to support the sky and earth, lifting up the huge ice mountain. Chu Xiu immediately felt a wave of extreme power as soon as they came into contact, causing his body to immediately fall down. The ground beneath his feet trembled and cracked. At the same time, an extreme chill came from the ice mountain, freezing his limbs and body. This divine ability of yours is an existence that unleashes the pinnacle of power. Its power is indeed extraordinary. But can you withstand this power? Yi Weikong sneered and waved his hand. The boundless chill once again condensed into sword aura that filled the sky and attacked Chu Xiu. Most of the martial artists who had fought with Chu Xiu did not know much about Chu Xiu. It was not because they looked down on Chu Xiu, but because there were few witnesses to Chu Xiu's previous achievements. Moreover, he improved too quickly and had too many things to show. When one thought that one truly understood Chu Xiu could once again show a trump card that one could not imagine. But Yi Weikong was different. Before Chu Xiu became a martial immortal, he had already fought with Chu Xiu. After being seriously injured by Chu Xiu, he had been secretly gathering information about Chu Xiu. Among the 3 divine abilities that Chu Xiu had, the cross-shaped lotus seal was a secret technique that specialized in countering evil and strange things. It was useless against him. Clear sky reflecting shadow was something that could only be used when one was desperate. Chu Xiu would not use it unless it was necessary. Even if he used it, Yi Weikong was confident that he could use his own strength to withstand it. Only the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth seemed to have no weaknesses. But in fact, as long as one's strength was strong enough, one could naturally suppress the opponent. The current scene was exactly the same as what he had envisioned. However, at the instant the sword aura filled the sky, the golden Buddha light around Chu Xiu and the monstrous demonic aura appeared at the same time. Using the indestructible holy demon body, Chu Xiu actually covered it with the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Countless chilling sword aura collided with the Dharma power enveloped by the indestructible holy demon body. Clanging sounds rang out, but it was ultimately unable to destroy it. Shatter! Chu Xiu bellowed angrily and smashed his fist down. The iceberg above his head was completely shattered, turning into countless frost and snow that scattered. However, the power consumed by this punch was several times more than when he normally used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Combining the cultivation technique and the divine ability was a manifestation of Chu Xiu's extreme control of power. However, at the same time, the power consumed by combining the two was also extremely shocking. Chu Xiu had no time to waste. After shattering the iceberg, Chu Xiu blasted another punch at Yi Weikong. The powerful force bombarded the space and let out a violent explosion. In the face of this absolute power, it seemed as though time had stopped in an instant. However, at this moment, Yi Weikong's lips curled into a strange smile. At the moment when Chu Xiu's punch was about to hit him, his body strangely turned into snowflakes that danced in the air. It was not the form of earth energy, nor was it the form of the power of laws. It was as though he had dissipated between heaven and earth and turned into real snowflakes that fell naturally, causing Chu Xiu's punch to miss. Even though Chu Xiu's punch tore the entire space apart and crushed the power of laws, he still couldn't find Yi Weikong. The consumption of the indestructible holy demon body and the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth was too great. When Chu Xiu's punch missed, he could only temporarily stop this state. However, on the other side, the frost and snow fell and Yi Weikong's figure strangely appeared from the frost and snow. It was as though he was supposed to be there all along. Looking at Chu Xiu, Yi Weikong said calmly, "Chu Xiu, this divine ability is something I've specially prepared for you. It's called Cold River Melting Snow. To be more precise, it's something I've prepared for your clear sky illuminating shadow. For that, I even made a trip to the former site of the Bliss Demon Palace to observe the traces left behind by your slash. The clear sky illuminating shadow slash is a divine ability of yours that has touched upon the pinnacle of the power of laws. No one can block it. Xangelua can't block it, and neither can Yen Beifeng. I'm stronger than them. Even if I can block it, I'll definitely be heavily injured. The cold river melting snow is able to truly disintegrate my body into countless snowflakes. No matter how powerful your slash is, can it slash through all the snowflakes? Chu Xiu didn't panic. Instead, he revealed a smile. City Lord Yi, you're an expert in the 8th heaven of martial immortal. You've schemed and schemed against a junior like me. You really think highly of me. Or perhaps, you're afraid of me? Yi Weikong said calmly, even a lion uses its full strength to capture a rabbit. I won't make the same mistake twice. Besides, you, Chu Xiu, aren't a rabbit. You're a wild wolf, a ferocious wild wolf. Chu Xiu wore a mysterious smile. Wolves are cunning and ferocious by nature. Since you know I'm a wolf, shouldn't you be wary of me? Didn't you feel something was amiss on the way here? You've used the shadow-shifting moon's secret technique of the Gu Yu's lineage to teleport into Cold River City. However, it's a bit too slow for you to come here from Cold River City. You've taken 7 days. I've prepared many things in this period of time. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Yi Weikong felt a chill in his heart. How did Chu Xiu know that they had teleported here using the shadow-shifting moon's secret technique? Moreover, even though Chu Xiu was a primeval venerable, he knew Fang Baidu, who was also a primeval venerable, very well. How did he know that they had traveled for 7 days? For the other party to be so sure and so precise, either there was a traitor in the sword sect of the world, or there was a traitor in Cold River City. Before Yi Weikong could react, Chu Xiu shouted in a low voice, Elder Wei, lend me a hand. Wei Shia was fighting with Fang Baidu below. Fang Baidu and Su Tianya didn't really kill each other. They were still waiting to see the result of the battle. Hearing this, Shang Tianliang, Lu Jianghe, Lu Fengxian, and other experts whose strength had reached the half-step martial immortal level took action together and temporarily blocked Fang Baidu's attack with all their strength. At the same time, Wei Shia formed a seal with his hands. His power poured into the rootless sacred flame like a monstrous flood. Almost in the blink of an eye, the rootless sacred flame was boiling. Although the rootless sacred flame could be controlled by a formation, it was only limited to making it appear in the outside world. It couldn't be used to attack. Only Wei Shia, who had integrated a trace of the power of the rootless sacred flame, could truly mobilize the rootless sacred flame. Amidst the silver-white flames, which were suffused with golden light, were constantly boiling. Traces of fire were drawn out from it, like a large net, directly enveloping Yi Weikong in it. The rootless sacred flame was a divine object born between heaven and earth. Its power was unstoppable by human beings. At that moment, Yi Weikong realized that he couldn't even mobilize the power of laws anymore, because the threads formed by the rootless sacred fire had already severed the laws of the world around him. Yi Weikong, who was enveloped by the threads, felt like he was trapped on an isolated island, and he couldn't mobilize any power at all. This time, you won't be able to escape even if you turn into ashes, let alone turning into snow. As Chu Xiu's voice fell, he had already slashed out with the breaking formation in his hand. The blade light was like a full moon, shining for eternity. The glaring moonlight shrouded everyone, and even the people present could not help but squint their eyes at the dazzling light. The clouds parted and the moon shone brightly. The blade light seemed to be tearing Yi Weikong's body apart. In the next moment, Yi Weikong's cold river turns into snow was cast, turning into countless snowflakes that drifted in the air. However, because of the shackles of the rootless sacred flame, Yi Weikong wouldn't be able to escape even if he turned into ashes, let alone turning into snow. Some snowflakes hit the rootless sacred flame and were directly burned into ashes by the scorching power. The other snowflakes cracked under the power of the clear sky illuminating shadow. Although there wasn't a trace of blood, Chu Xiu could clearly feel that his vitality was dissipating under the clear sky illuminating shadow. After a while, the moon's shadow's blade light completely dissipated. Chu Xiu's face was already pale. There was no longer any vitality in the space enveloped by the rootless sacred flame. Wei Shia also hurriedly withdrew the rootless sacred flame. This was his limit. It seemed that Yi Weikong's body and soul had been destroyed. However, Chu Xiu still frowned and didn't relax. Chapter 1354. Chu Xiu was not an arrogant person. He had always been very clear about his own strength. He had 100% confidence in defeating his enemy. In reality, he would also make a battle plan based on that 90% confidence. Chu Xiu had never underestimated Yi Weikong, so he did not feel that Yi Weikong would die just like that. The clear sky illuminating shadow was indeed powerful. It was even the strongest divine ability that Chu Xiu could grasp at the moment. However, it was not enough to instantly kill Yi Weikong. Back then, Jun Wuxian was only at the 7th heavenly layer. Later on, he was heavily injured to the 5th heavenly layer or even lower. Yet, he still survived the clear sky illuminating shadow. The current Yi Weikong was even stronger than Jun Wuxian at his peak. Could he be instantly killed by a single slash from Chu Xiu? However, in this space, there was indeed no life to speak of. Just as Chu Xiu was still thinking, snow began to fall from the clear sky. The snowflakes did not disperse. Instead, they condensed into Yi Weikong's face. There was no physical body. Instead, it was a huge, human face completely condensed from snowflakes. It floated in the air just like that. Yi Weikong's voice was like thunder. It was deafening, but at the same time, it contained the powerful might of the world. Chu Xiu, do you think you can kill me just like that? Naive. The mortal body is nothing but an illusion. Only the laws of the world are eternal. The frigid river turning snow isn't me turning into snow. It's me turning into the laws of the world. As long as the world doesn't perish and the seasons continue, I can exist forever. A mere mortal body has forced you to use all your trump cards. Chu Xiu, no matter how scheming you are, you won't be able to escape death today. The gigantic human face in midair laughed maniacally, its voice shaking the void like a thunderous roar. At that moment, Chu Xiu only stared at the human face and indifferently spat out 2 words, madman. Yi Weikong had gone mad. He was possessed. It wasn't qi deviation, but spirit deviation. He had walked into the most extreme and impossible path. Earlier, Chu Xiu had been wondering why Yi Weikong was able to reach the 8th heavenly layer martial immortal. One must know that Yi Weikong had been trapped at the 7th heavenly layer martial immortal for a very long time. Furthermore, with his age, it was likely that he would not be able to make another breakthrough in his lifetime. In the end, he was seriously injured by Fang Yinglong last time, but he was still able to step into the 1st layer of heaven. This in itself was somewhat unreasonable. After suffering a setback, he would endure hardships and then break through the little universe. This in itself was a very ridiculous thing. If anger and hatred could allow people to break through, then these Daoist warriors would probably be lining up to be humiliated. Now, Chu Xiu finally understood that Yi Weikong didn't break through in anger, but in anger. Ordinary martial immortals would be controlling the laws. However, the current Yi Weikong was being controlled by the laws. Transforming one's body into the laws was easy to say, but how strong was the power of the laws in this world? Even a Dao master could not completely control one of the rules. Yet, Yi Weikong had abandoned his physical body and completely transformed into the laws of this world. In theory, he was indeed undying and indestructible. But the problem was, how insignificant was his willpower when compared to the laws of this world? It was so insignificant that it was indescribable. The true power of laws was the Tao, the countless great Daoists in this world. The great Daoists were emotionless, and the laws were also emotionless. They shouldn't have their own thoughts. Thus, it wouldn't take long for Yi Weikong to be completely assimilated by the laws of this world, and become a part of the laws of this world. At that time, he would indeed be undying and indestructible. However, if he lost his intelligence, could he still be considered a human? Yi Weikong had abandoned his physical body, but little did he know that only with his physical body present could he be considered a human. Chu Xiu sighed, "You all really know how to play. The stronger your cultivation, the more daring your thoughts will be. There will come a day when you will play yourself to death. Since you want to die so much, I can help you. It can be considered as freeing you. I've only thought about this before, but I haven't used it yet. Today, I can court death, and give it a try here. The erosion of the laws of heaven and earth on Yi Weikong was huge. It had only been a few sentences, but Yi Weikong's mind was already a little unclear. He was probably only left with obsession and instinct, the obsession to kill Chu Xiu. The huge human face in mid-air bit down, and wherever it passed, everything began to freeze. Everything that could be seen was frozen, and even time and space that couldn't be seen were frozen. Facing such a powerful attack that was comparable to the power of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu took a deep breath and formed a seal with his hand. The green sprout formed by the manifestation of the creation demonic path bloomed in Chu Xiu's palm. However, this time, it wasn't an attack. Instead, it was drawing upon the power within his body. It was the power of origin within his body. Last time, Chu Xiu followed the records left behind by the Sanskrit and was ready to court death by activating the power of the origin of yin and yang. But the result wasn't very good, and he was directly injured by the backlash. However, when he went deep into the core of the origin and felt the power mixed in the origin, it also gave Chu Xiu a kind of enlightenment, or a bold idea. He felt that he had comprehended a mystique. That's right, it was just a feeling. Even Chu Xiu wasn't sure if he could use this mystique normally. For a long time, the mystique that Chu Xiu possessed could actually not be truly comprehended by him. The law embodiment of heaven and earth was an ancient mystique of unknown origin. The clear sky illuminating shadow was a powerful mystique that belonged to Dugu Weiwei. The cross-shaped lotus seal should only be considered half of Chu Xiu's. Without the Subhuti treasure tree, Chu Xiu wouldn't have been able to comprehend it. And now, the mystique that Chu Xiu was about to use was the true mystique that belonged to him. Facing the huge face, the yin and yang origin in Chu Xiu's body had already been activated by the creation demon path. Based on the previous experience, this time, Chu Xiu used less power to activate the yin and yang origin. Of course, the result was the same. The power that couldn't be controlled once again filled Chu Xiu's body, as if it wanted to tear him apart. The yin and yang origin really couldn't be controlled. The key point wasn't how much power Chu Xiu activated, but how much power the yin and yang origin exploded. It was like the vibration produced when the yin and yang origin merged for the first time. It happened to be within the suppression range of Chu Xiu's full strength, so he could directly increase by one level. However, it was a pity that such a situation was something that could only be chanced upon and not sought for. Later on, when Chu Xiu and Chu Xiu took the initiative to draw upon the power of the yin and yang origin energy, it had exceeded the limits of what he could endure, just like what was happening now. Therefore, there was only one way to deal with power that he couldn't bear, and that was to pour it out. Forming a seal with his hands, Chu Xiu's entire body turned into a yin and yang body. Half of it was shrouded in pitch-black demonic qi, while the other half was suffused with a dazzling golden light. The two kinds of power were held in Chu Xiu's hands. His physical body was almost unable to bear this power, and traces of cracks appeared. And it wasn't just his physical body. This power even tore at his spirit, giving Chu Xiu a splitting headache and almost making him faint. At this time, Chu Xiu was completely relying on instinct and willpower to forcibly control the power in his hands. Yin was below, yang was above, and he put his palms together and twisted. The moment the yin and yang power combined, there was a loud explosion. The entire world had changed at this moment. The sky was yang, and the earth was yin. The two combined, entangled, and tore at each other, reproducing the chaos. The yin and yang power were like two huge millstones, sandwiching the huge human head that Yi Weikong had transformed into. Under the grinding, any existence would be crushed and turned into the purest power of chaos. Even if Yi Weikong could turn himself into the power of the laws in this world, under the grinding of the yin and yang grind, the world would reappear in chaos, and any power of laws would dissipate. This was a great magic that could directly point to the power of origin. Worldly millstone, furnace of good fortune. This was the magic that Chu Xiu had comprehended after comprehending the yin and yang origin power. The former used the yin and yang power to transform into a worldly millstone, crushing everything, and any power of laws would turn into nothingness. The latter used the power of chaos to reenact the furnace of good fortune, construct the laws, and recast the power of the world. However, with Chu Xiu's current strength, the latter was only a deduction, and he didn't have the qualifications to use it at all. Of course, even if it was the worldly millstone, Chu Xiu could barely use it now. At that moment, Chu Xiu's yin and yang origin power had been unleashed, and he had returned to his original appearance. However, the impact from the yin and yang origin power caused traces of blood to appear all over his body. He was like a shattered doll that would shatter with the slightest movement. As the yin and yang power fused into chaos, the laws in the sky had been completely shattered. Yi Weikong was dead. With his body transformed into laws, the laws in this world had been completely shattered into chaos. How was he supposed to continue living? Not even great overarching golden immortals could save him. At that moment, Fang Baidu and Su Tianya had also broken free from the battle. They stared at the scene before them, dumbfounded, as if they didn't dare to believe their eyes. Earlier, Fang Baidu had felt that their attack this time around wouldn't be that simple, and that they would likely encounter some obstacles. However, he didn't expect the result to be completely different from what he had anticipated. Yi Weikong was an existence of the 8th level of martial immortal. Although he was a martial immortal who had gone astray and become a demon, he was still an 8th level martial immortal. In the end, Yi Weikong had also died by Chu Xiu's hands. That scene made them feel like they were in a dream. Su Tianya looked to Fang Baidu and said with a deep voice, "Do you still want to fight?" The strongest Yi Weikong had died. It seemed like they had already lost. However, Fang Baidu discovered that they might still be able to put up a fight. The divine ability Chu Xiu had used to kill Yi Weikong was indeed very powerful. It was so powerful that even Fang Baidu was trembling in fear. However, Chu Xiu had also paid a great price for that. He had been crippled, and his aura was extremely weak. As Wei Shiya had helped Chu Xiu unleash the rootless sacred flame, although he wasn't injured, he had exhausted all of his power. It would appear that the only person present that still had the battle power of a martial immortal was Qinqing Di. They could still fight this battle. They could win. Chapter 1355. Fang Baidu felt that it was not an illusion that he could win. Although he and Su Tianya, the two prime venerables, had always been at a disadvantage in front of Chu Xiu and looked very cowardly, in fact, both of them had the strength of a 4th heaven martial immortal, and it was possible for them to fight against a 6th heaven or even a 7th heaven martial immortal if they joined forces. Chu Xiu's strength was indeed shocking and even frightening. But now that Chu Xiu had been crippled and there was only Qinqing Di left, what else did they have to be afraid of? Fang Baidu shouted without turning his head, "Ling Ta, use the wheel of the illusory moon to trap Qinqing Di. Fei Hong, help your master put on the dragon scale armor to block those shrimp soldiers and crab generals. I will deal with the rest." As soon as Fang Baidu finished shouting, he saw a beam of moonlight soar into the sky, split the space, and directly imprisoned him in it. At the same time, Luo Feiheng also held the dragon scale armor in his hand, but he did not activate it. Instead, he looked at the two of them vigilantly. Fang Baidu and Su Tianya looked incredulous. Feiheng, what are you doing?" With an innocent expression on her face, Long Ling shook her head gently and said, "Master, I didn't want to do this, but since you want to attack Cult Master Chu, I have no choice but to do it." Luo Feiheng also said helplessly, "Master, although you are good to me, Chu Xiu is even better to me. In this situation, it is not the time to talk about Jianghu morality." At this time, Fang Baidu and Su Tianya's faces were as gloomy as water, and the expressions on their faces were extremely distorted. They understood everything. How could there be so many coincidences in this world? They had just lost a disciple, and now 2 more outstanding disciples had come to their door. They had just been teleported to Cold River City, but Chu Xiu had already received the news and was prepared in advance. They thought that there was a spy in Cold River City, but who would have thought that the spy had been nailed to him all along? Fang Baidu glared at Chu Xiu with bloodshot eyes. It was as if he wanted to skin Chu Xiu alive. Chu Xiu. You are ruthless. How vicious. Not only did you kill 2 of my disciples, you even destroyed 2 of my disciples. No, to be precise, they were never our disciples in the first place. Now that you have the inheritances of our 2 lineages and the artifacts of our 2 lineages, do you think you can defeat us? Today, even if I have to risk my life, I will take you down with me. Fang Baidu was really mad with rage, and so was Su Tianya. He was even ready to burn his blood essence to fight for his life. The 2 of them were both martial immortal level experts. Yet, at that moment, they were being toyed around by Chu Xiu like 2 fools. Even their only hope, their disciples, had been arranged by Chu Xiu. Even Fang Baidu, who had always been calm and collected, couldn't stand this kind of grievance and humiliation. He wanted to perish together with Chu Xiu. However, at this time, Chu Xiu didn't take the opportunity to attack. Instead, he said calmly, "You two, it seems that there was no great hatred between you and me from the beginning, right? It's true that I killed your disciples, but it was because they were bewitched by the disciples of swordsman Ling Tian's lineage and came to make trouble for me. That's why I killed them." In other words, a disciple who can be easily bewitched by others' words can't be a great person. Are you sure that such a person can inherit the mantle of dragon subduing and Guyu lineages in the future? Of course, in the end, no matter who is right or wrong, I killed your disciples, but now I have returned them to you. Isn't that enough? As soon as Chu Xiu said this, Fang Baidu and Su Tianya, who were about to fight desperately just now, were stunned and looked back subconsciously. Long Ling smiled and said, "Master, please forgive me. I was only following orders and had no other choice. I had a sect before, but I didn't have a master. If Master is still willing to accept me as a disciple, I am willing to inherit the mantle of Guyu lineage and pass it on." Su Tianya was also good to Luo Feiheng. Upon hearing this, Luo Feiheng glanced at Long Ling and hurriedly said, "I am the same as her." Chu Xiu's suggestion to surrender was not a sudden idea, but a plan he had made beforehand. In addition to the information about the World Sword sect leading the attack on the eastern region, Long Ling also gave him a suggestion. She suggested that Chu Xiu not kill Guyu and the dragon subduing faction, but try to persuade them to surrender. Fang Baidu and Su Tianya were the most typical primeval venerables. Most of the time, they were unwilling to step into the Jianghu and chose to cultivate in seclusion. The most important thing in their lives was to cultivate a qualified disciple so that they would have the face to meet their ancestors in the future. If their disciples could be more outstanding than their ancestors, then their lives would be worth it. Therefore, regardless of whether it was the battle for supremacy of the 4 regions or the battle for providence, they actually did not care much about it. Even when the 2 disciples were killed by Chu Xiu, they were already relieved. This time, if Xingjiu Yuan had not threatened them, they would not have made a move. Therefore, as long as Chu Xiu could defeat Yi Weikong, it would not be impossible to persuade them to surrender. Su Tianya and Fang Baidu looked at each other with a complicated look in their eyes. Should they fight or surrender? To be honest, they really could not bear to part with Long Ling, and Luo Feiheng. Under the premise that most of the genius disciples had been recruited by the top Daoist sects, the talent and potential of these 2 people could be said to be the highest they had ever seen. It could even be said that their potential was higher than that of the disciples they had recruited before. In the future, let alone inheriting their mantle, it was even possible for them to surpass them or even their ancestors. Although they still had some grudges against Long Ling, and Luo Feiheng for being Chu Xiu's people, when they thought about it, they were Chu Xiu's people before, and it was the latter case for them to acknowledge him as their master. If they could make them renounce darkness for light, in just a few months, they could not believe how great their charm was. After a long silence, Fang Baidu said, "Even if you kill Yi Weikong and we give up on attacking, you will still lose this battle. The World Sword Sect is not targeting the Kunlun Devil Cult, but the entire Eastern Territory. Now, we don't even know what the High Heaven Sect and the Imperial Sky Pavilion are like, and there are several martial immortals there. How are you going to fight? When the High Heaven Sect and the Imperial Sky Pavilion are destroyed, the Kunlun Devil Cult will not be able to hold on alone." Chu Xiu said lightly, "Before I came, they couldn't hold on. Now that I'm here, the result will be different. I already know the plan of the World Sword Sect. How could I possibly not have made any preparations? Besides, the World Sword Sect will not expect me to appear in front of them." Fang Baidu's and Su Tianya's expressions changed slightly. There was absolutely no problem with the plan of the World Sword Sect before, but now the existence of Chu Xiu and the existence of the Kunlun Devil Cult itself was the biggest variable. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Both of you, now that things have reached this point, there is no room for neutrality. The world of great battles has begun. Even if both of you want to live in seclusion in the mountains, you will be dragged out of the mountains. So now, both of you only have two choices. One is that I killed 2 of your disciples, and now I will compensate you with 2 more disciples. Both of us can forget our past enmity, settle our grievances, and join forces from now on. I promise that as long as the Kunlun Devil Cult does not perish, the Zhenlong and Guyu lineages will continue to exist forever. As for the second choice, you and I will fight to the death today. Both of you can choose for yourselves." As soon as Chu Xiu said this, Su Tianya and Fang Baidu looked at each other and fell silent. After a long while, Long Longer called out softly, "Master." This call of master seemed to give Fang Baidu a way out. He snorted coldly and said, "Since you know I am your master, why don't you untie the illusionary moon wheel for me?" Hearing this, Long Longer subconsciously looked at Chu Xiu. Seeing Chu Xiu nod gently, she immediately untied the illusionary moon wheel and respectfully handed it to Fang Baidu. Fang Baidu snorted coldly and said, "Forget it, you can keep holding on to this thing. I have no intention of taking back what I have given away." Although Fang Baidu had made a choice, it was impossible to say that he did not have any grudges in his heart. However, this choice was already the most beneficial for them. Chu Xiu laughed and said, "Both of you, you will know in the future what kind of right decision you have made." Su Tianya snorted coldly and said, "Right? You'd better solve the crisis in front of you first. Right now, the Sword Sect and the Imperial Sky Pavilion are besieging the High Heaven Sect and the Imperial Sky Pavilion. You have been seriously injured after killing Yi Weikong. What else do you have to reverse the situation in the Eastern Territory? Although the Kunlun Devil Cult is not weak, apart from you, there are not many people who have high-end combat power. You should know that the entire Sword Sect has the 4 great sword seniors." Su Tianya and the others had now admitted defeat. On the surface, they shook hands with Chu Xiu and made peace, but in fact, they had surrendered. However, after all, the two sides had accumulated grievances for a long time. Su Tianya subconsciously argued with Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu did not care and said to Fang Baidu, "Venerable Fang, your Guyu clan has many secret techniques. I heard that you have a secret technique called the moon shifting technique, which can quickly transfer the power of one's vitality and repair one's physical body, right?" Fang Baidu glanced at Long Longer angrily. This information must have been leaked to Chu Xiu by this little traitor again. Of course, none of that mattered anymore. Fang Baidu nodded and said, "There is indeed such a method. However, cult leader Chu, your injuries are too serious. If you want to transfer your injuries completely, you'll have to find a martial immortal to mend your body. However, in that case, this martial immortal will be temporarily crippled due to the loss of vitality. It is not worth it to exchange a martial immortal for a cultivator." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I don't need a martial immortal. The heaven and earth profound enlightenment realm cultivators under my command have very rich vitality." With that, Chu Xiu looked at Lu Jianghe, causing Lu Jianghe to shiver. Chapter 1356. Lu Jianghu now felt that Chu Xiu was very unkind. Every time something good happened, Chu Xiu would not be there, but when it came to this kind of thing, he would be there. Seeing that Chu Xiu wanted to make him bleed again, Lu Jianghu hurriedly said, "Great cult master Chu, are you trying to kill me? Your physical cultivation is even stronger than Qingdi's. How can my qi and blood be enough to repair your body?" Seeing that Lu Jianghu was so scared, Lu Fengxian smiled and said, "Count me in. Our qi and blood together should be enough." Fang Baidu looked Lv Fengxian up and down, then nodded and said, "With you, it should be enough." Chu Xiu did not refuse. He nodded and said, "Thank you, brother Lu." Lu Jianghu muttered, "I also donated blood. Why don't you thank me?" Chu Xiu ignored Lu Jianghu and asked Fang Baidu to perform the Great Moon shifting skill as soon as possible. One had to admit that the various secret skills of the Guyu lineage were indeed amazing. Even if Chu Xiu ate elixirs like jelly beans, it would take him more than a month to recover from his injuries. But with Fang Baidu's secret skill, after extracting the qi and blood of Lu Fengxian and Lu Jianghu, Chu Xiu's physical injuries were instantly healed to the peak. As for the consumption of strength, there was no need to worry about it. Chu Xiu would be able to replenish it when they were on their way. But there was no such thing as perfection in this world. The various powerful secret skills of the Guyu lineage were indeed amazing, but their combat strength was a little low. That was why the Guyu lineage and the dragon-subduing lineage had been on good terms for generations and became allies. The two sides could complement each other. After stretching his body, Chu Xiu waved his hand and said to Shang Tianliang and the others, "Let's clean up the other Cold River City survivors first. Those who surrender will be spared." Shang Tianliang and the others did not ask what would happen if they did not surrender. It was not their first day in the Jianghu. Was there a need to ask if they did not surrender? After cleaning up the cultivators of Cold River City, Chu Xiu waved his hand and removed the rootless sacred flame array. Chu Xiu asked Fang Baidu, "Venerable Fang, is it possible if we teleport to Cold River City now?" Fang Baidu nodded and said, "It's doable. I've also forged a formation plate that can locate the coordinates of Cold River City. However, don't even think about sending so many people over. I don't have that much power. At most, I can only send less than 100 people." Wei Shia thought and said, "It should be closer to High Heaven Sect. Cold River City or High Heaven Sect is closer to High Wei Sect, Shia." Wei Shia thought for a moment and said, "It should be closer to High Heaven Sect. The distance between us and Imperial Sky Pavilion is the same as the distance between Cold River City and Imperial Sky Pavilion." Just when Fang Baidu thought that Chu Xiu would let them teleport to Cold River City first and then go to High Heaven Sect, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "Leave a small number of people to guard the Kunlun devil cult. Brother Lu, old Lu, I will leave these people to you. You have lost too much vitality and are no longer fit to fight. The others will come with me to Imperial Sky Pavilion to rescue them." Fang Baidu was taken aback when he heard this. What kind of trick was this? Giving up what was near and seeking what was far away? However, Fang Baidu seemed to have thought of something, and his expression changed abruptly. He looked at Chu Xiu with a complicated expression, and there was even a hint of fear in his eyes. It was only now that he finally understood why he was unable to establish a sect like Chu Xiu even though his strength wasn't bad. Although strength was very important to establish a sect, ruthless methods were even more important. Otherwise, the sect they had spent so much effort to establish would probably be destroyed in less than 2 generations. At this time, in Imperial Sky Pavilion, the cultivators of Imperial Sky Pavilion had already fought with the people of Martial God Sect and Great Thousand Sect to the point where they were almost exchanging lives for lives. The two sects launched a pincer attack, and the Great Thousand Sect, which was proficient in spirit arrays, had completely broken the defensive spirit arrays of Imperial Sky Pavilion. They could only use human lives to fill in the gaps. Zhong Qiushui used all his strength and forced Mu Shinshao and Sikong Jialua to retreat with the Imperial Heaven Sword, but he was also close to exhaustion. Tao Qianming came over and said in a deep voice, Sect Master Mu, launch an all-out attack and destroy Imperial Sky Pavilion in one go. Don't waste any more time. Mu Xianxiao waved his hand and said, although the soldiers in despair may not win, the power that they burst out at that moment is amazing. Sect Master Tao, don't worry. It's not easy to cultivate the disciples of our sections. Why do you have to force them to their deaths? Let's wait until they can't hold on any longer, then we'll make our move. The martial gods sect had always been famous among the Daoist people for their strong physical cultivation and close combat secret techniques. Everyone thought that the cultivators of the martial gods sect were rough and simple-minded strong men. However, Mu Xianxiao's eyes were shining with cunning. Even Tao Qianming was ashamed of his inferiority. 2 hours later, Mu Xianxiao saw that the Imperial Sky Pavilion had gathered all their disciples, but he did not make a move. Instead, he shouted, the forces of the eastern region are weak, and the Imperial Sky Pavilion is doomed. Why do you want to fight to the death for the Imperial Sky Pavilion? Even without the Imperial Sky Pavilion, there is still the martial god sect. All the disciples of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, if you surrender now, I promise in the name of the martial god sect that you can join the martial god sect directly. When the southern region completely devours the eastern region in the future, the territory of the Imperial Sky Pavilion will still belong to you. You'll just have to change the name. You only have one chance. Do you want to join the martial god sect and welcome a new era of great competition, or do you want to fight to the death with the Imperial Sky Pavilion? It's up to you. Previously, the Imperial Sky Pavilion had gathered all their disciples. It was obvious that they wanted to fight to the death. Everyone's morale had risen to its peak, and they were ready to die. However, who would have thought that the martial gods sect would not choose to attack at this moment? Instead, they were asking them to surrender. This made some people waver in their resolve to die. They wanted to fight in one go, but if they let it go, they would not be able to make up for it. Previously, when Chu Xiu was in the Imperial Sky Pavilion, he had already sensed some loopholes in the Imperial Sky Pavilion, or rather, shortcomings. The Imperial Sky Pavilion was not united enough. Previously, when the old pavilion master was around, he was fair and did his best for the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Therefore, he was loved and respected by everyone in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, after Li Wuxiang became the pavilion master, he recruited his trusted subordinates and suppressed those who disagreed with him. As a result, the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion was divided. Most people were either on Zhong Qiushui's side, or they were playing it safe and only cared about their own interests. Although Zhong Qiushui became the pavilion master later on, it was too short a time for him to change the situation. At this moment, those who were willing to fight to the death with the Imperial Sky Pavilion were either Zhong Qiushui's trusted subordinates or those who were promoted by the old pavilion master. They were loyal to the Imperial Sky Pavilion. As for those who previously belonged to Li Wuxiang, as well as those neutral martial artists who maintained an attitude of self-preservation, they were shaken. A cultivator threw down the weapon in his hand and shouted, I'm willing to surrender. I'm willing to join the martial god sect. That cultivator was not weak. He was a heaven and earth and lightning realm elder in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. He was definitely one of the higher-ups in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. As soon as he made the first move, it was like a chain reaction. The other cultivators in the Imperial Sky Pavilion surrendered one after another. In an instant, 1/3 of the people present had surrendered. Jianghu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and cursed, these ungrateful ***stards. If it wasn't for the Imperial Sky Pavilion, they wouldn't be where they are today. Although Jianghu was a slippery person and had some petty thoughts, he was personally promoted by the old pavilion master. He might not be loyal to Zhong Qiushui, but he was loyal to the old pavilion master and the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Zhong Qiushui sighed and said, everyone has their own ambitions. Let him be. However, Zhong Qiushui's eyes were flickering with a determination to die. He gripped the Imperial Heaven sword in his hand tightly. The ancient greenish bronze sword was stained with his blood and emitted a dazzling and majestic aura. It's fine if the Martial Gods sect and the Kiliakosm sect want to annex the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Since you're not strong enough, you deserve to be annihilated. However, I wonder how many people from the two sects will die with the Imperial Sky Pavilion? The expressions of Mu Xianxia and the others froze. Zhong Qiushui alone was not scary, but the Imperial Heaven Sword in his hand was scary. A top-notch sect like the Imperial Sky Pavilion that had existed for more than 10,000 years was not that easy to annihilate. The other party was so weak that he did not even have the strength of a martial immortal. No one knew what kind of trump card he could pull out. However, as long as they could exhaust Zhong Qiushui to death and seize the Imperial Heaven Sword, no one in the Imperial Sky Pavilion would be able to stop them. The strength of the Martial Gods sect would also improve. Just as the despairing Zhong Qiushui was about to sacrifice what little vitality he had left to activate the power of the Imperial Heaven Sword, a voice suddenly rang out. Pavilion Master Zhong, it's not your style to be so pessimistic. We're not at the end of the road yet. What are you doing? When Zhong Qiushui, Jianghu, Lu Sanjin, and the others heard this voice, their eyes flashed with surprise and even ecstasy. Chu Xiu did not disappoint them. On the other side of the battlefield, a large group of Kunlun devil cult martial artists emerged and joined the battle without hesitation. At this moment, Mu Xianxiao and Tao Qianming were in disbelief. Yi Weikong and two prime sovereigns of Cold River City had attacked the Kunlun devil cult together, but they had failed to defeat the Kunlun devil cult. Moreover, Chu Xiu was still full of energy, and it was impossible to tell that he was injured. It was only then that Mu Xianxiao noticed Fang Baidu and Su Tianya who were standing behind Chu Xiu. The expression on their faces could no longer be described as shock. It was as if they had seen a ghost. 3 martial immortals went to attack Chu Xiu. Yet, as they fought, 2 of them ended up attacking Chu Xiu instead. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.